Welcome to Super Context, a podcast autopsy of media.
How we consume it and how it informs our everyday culture.
I'm Christian Sager, a writer and a designer.
And I'm Charlie Bennett, a librarian and a radio raconteur.
Each episode is us trying to understand the entertainment world that we all live in.
Just a little bit better. Today's episode is about the first season of the HBO show Deadwood. This revisionist Western is a mix of fictional and historical narratives about how law, society, and America came to South Dakota in the late 1800s. We talk about how the show's creator, David Milch, got from ancient Rome to the Dakota Gold Rush, and all the lines he crossed to get there.
You can find show notes for this episode on Patreon at patreon.com/supercontext, or you can write us an email at supercontextpodcast@gmail.com. What do you think this show is about? Could it be produced today? And did it predict our current conflict between civilized living and pure narcissism?
So this was comfort viewing for me. I actually had the box set, which was a very nicely produced box set, both the content and also it opened. It had kind of a magnet situation, so it was like a book almost. Yeah. I really liked that. I played the first season of Deadwood on repeat and out of order whenever I wanted for years, at least 3, if not more. I was looking at my life and about, the production schedule for the show, and I realized this all kind of matched up with my incredibly toxic relationship with a woman before I met my wife.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel bad saying that it was a toxic relationship still, because I really cared for her. I loved her, and I think she loved me, and we had a lot of fun, and I enjoy some of the memories.
Mm-hmm.
But that shit was toxic. It was bad for business, bad for America. And I have wondered sometimes, was I modeling some of the really big, aggressive, dangerous emotions in Deadwood, watching these characters who were at the extreme of, human existence, of emotional existence, of precarity and desperation? I don't know if you saw this stat in all of the stuff we read, but there were like 7 murders a day in Deadwood at its peak. I
did. Yeah.
A truly violent and sexually violent and emotionally violent place, as portrayed in the show and as understood in popular consciousness.
Yeah, I mean, I think you could say that this show is like a magnifying glass on what makes America toxic, and is primarily about like white male toxicity.
Yeah.
In ways that David Milch intended, and also I think we may find did not intend, that are just part of his generation and mindset.
Well, this is long enough ago. People are still talking about the early 2000s as a different time. I say still. They are now talking about it as if it were a different time. Anyway, just to close the loop on my weird relationship. I know for sure that if Al Swearingen knocked on the door of my apartment and my girlfriend at the time answered it, that she would have run away with him or allowed him to steal her away immediately. And that sounds like a joke, except it's totally something she told me. Yeah.
So that is interesting. I'm not going to spend a ton of time at the top of this episode analyzing this lost relationship, but it sounds like she was as responsible for the toxicity as you were then.
Oh, I would never take the blame away from her on this one.
Okay.
I'll share it. No problem.
But, I can see
bad news,
there is a romantic quality to Al Swearingen's soliloquies, but at the same time, he is, and I think this is, again, intentional, he's a horrible person. He treats everybody around him terribly. He is a product of his own environment, but I can see that there would be like an appeal to that both for you and her.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll say a few things. One is that I think that this is tied with The Wire for my favorite TV show of all time.
Yep. I'll go
And
with that.
has pretty much been in that slot for the 20 some odd years that it's been around. Um, yeah, it is a spectacular failure in a lot of ways, in that like it is a great piece of creative genius, but as we're going to talk about, some of that creative genius also led to it not succeeding as a product, despite the critical acclaim.
A sustainable product.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. People complain that we only got 3 seasons of this show. I think it's remarkable that we even got 3 seasons of this show and plus the movie. I have always been fascinated with this show, but I've never wanted to do a deep dive into David Milch because
Ah,
I think
yeah.
I could sense that there's something dangerous there. He's like a rattlesnake.
Yep.
And um I did, like you, I didn't buy the box set, but this is back in the day when I used to get Netflix DVDs in the mail, and
Hmm.
I was getting, a Deadwood DVD every couple days,
Yeah.
watching 3 or 4 episodes and watching all of the extra content.
I loved those commentaries, man.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff. I think a theme of this episode for me, though, is going to be what is the price of this kind of genius?
Oh, okay.
Um, I think too, it's probably important for me to plant something up top because I have some similar to you, but in a different way. I have some emotional uh, turmoil
Yeah.
connected to this topic. So I'm going to lay this out as quickly as I can without like bursting into tears. 2 years ago, I made the decision to move from Portland, Oregon, back to New England. And I got a job out here in Massachusetts. I packed up my car. I shipped all my stuff out east, and I put my 2 dogs in the car. And the plan was that we were going to take a week and we were going to drive across the country and we were going to camp in the car. My car is like kitted out so you can there's a bed in the back and everything. And we were going to just stop across the way and have a good time, me and the 2 dogs. And we got to South Dakota and it was the beginning of August and it was 100 degrees in South Dakota. And the campsite that we were supposed to go to was so hot that I was like, we need a hotel. Like the dogs can't be outside in this. And the closest hotel I could find was in Deadwood. And I was planning to go to Deadwood the next day anyways, because I had always wanted to see what Deadwood was like. Coincidentally, it was also the same week that the Sturgis Motorcycle Rally was in South Dakota, which I did not know about until then. But there was thousands of bikers all over Deadwood and all of its surrounding towns. So we pulled in, we went to this hotel. All the bikers loved my dogs. And then in the morning, I got up and I was like, we're going to get up real early because it's hot again. We'll do a little walk around Deadwood downtown. And we'll get in the car and continue on our way with this journey. And we got about halfway around Deadwood when my dog Diesel collapsed in the street. And it's like something was really wrong with him. And I thought at the time like he had heat stroke. And I, very carefully tried to get him back to the car, which is about, half a mile away from where we were at the time. And along the way, like he had to stop and he vomited a couple times and he was not well. We got to the car. I got the air conditioning on. I went to a grocery store. I got a big bag of ice, got him some fresh water, put it all in the back of the car. We went on our way. And, I'm by myself in the middle of nowhere. Um, and this is going on. And I drove from Deadwood to a place called Chamberlain, South Dakota, which is halfway across the state. And all along the way, he was throwing up in the back seat. And he was better than he had been, but he was still throwing up. And I was like, this dog, I think he has heat stroke. Maybe I need to take him to a vet. So I got him to a hotel in Chamberlain. I called the nearest vet to Chamberlain, South Dakota was almost 4 hours away in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And I was like, they told me, stay overnight, try to keep him cool. And then if there's bad, like if it continues to get worse, come here as soon as you can. But that's how, like, there's no emergency veterinary clinics for 4 hours
Yeah.
around this place. That's how isolated South Dakota still is. Um, and I gave him a cold bath and I did everything I could to try to make him comfortable. And the next morning I woke up and he was vomiting blood. And I got the dogs in the car and we hightailed it like 5 in the morning for Sioux Falls. And we pulled up to that vet and I carried him inside and they said, we're going to try to figure out what's going on. And Wynn and I went and we got a hotel. And they called us back and they said, "Hey, so we did a scan, and he has an obstruction in his like stomach and intestines, and we need to get it out." And I was like, "I have no idea what this is about." And he was in real bad shape. So, I gave him a hug. I said goodbye. I told him to hang on there, and they were going to do immediate surgery. And I went back to the hotel and I fell asleep and I woke up to the phone ringing and I picked it up and they said that he died in surgery. Um, and I just, I'm not going to go into it, but that dog was very special to me. There's a strange history around him coming into my life and he was very special to me. But yeah, so my experience with Deadwood is like that was where the death of this dog started for
Yeah.
me. And it was like I do not have good associations with that place. And I will say objectively, if none of that had happened, modern day Deadwood is a tourist trap, like with a two capital T's. Like all that is there is just like tchotchke shops and fake saloons and fake craps tables, like it's kind of gross. The surroundings, like the Black Hills, are gorgeous, but it was not what I was hoping for. And then that happened, and yeah, so end of that story is that I spent a week in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, waiting for to get his ashes back before Wynn and I went on the rest of our way and drove back to New England. This is a story that some of the listeners know because I'm pretty open about it and I wrote about it in my newsletter when it happened, but I didn't feel like we could do this episode without me starting admitting to that.
Yeah. I'm really sorry that happened.
Thank
I
you. You
know.
were one of the people I
Yeah.
called right when it happened, and a lot of really good friends coached me over the phone throughout that
Yeah.
week because that is one of the hardest times of my life.
You had a bunch of hard times uh,
That is also
leading up to
true.
that one. Yeah.
Also true.
Okay. So probably this is where I call you a cocksucker and
Thank
we
you.
move on.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's how David Milch would probably handle
Yeah.
emotional outbursts
Yeah.
and any of his characters.
Life is pain and trouble.
See my comment about
S-
toxicity.
Suffer it and give some back.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Why
What is
did I just
Deadwood?
call Chris a cocksucker? Which is the answer to the question, what is Deadwood? Deadwood is an American Western television show, which is a weird thing to say about it to me. I mean, I know that's what it is,
Yeah.
but I also just don't. That's not how it resonates with me anymore. Yeah, there's some cowboys in it, but they don't matter. An American Western television show that was on HBO back when HBO was just HBO mostly from 2004 to 2006. It was 3 seasons. We're going to talk about season one only, partly because we go long, just generally, and also because season one is the one that got me and stayed with me.
Mm-hmm.
It's set in 1870s Deadwood, South Dakota, before it was incorporated, before South Dakota was even a state, right? And
I believe that's true. Yeah.
I feel like I should look that
At
up
least
now.
going by the history of the TV show, which,
The way they
we're going
talk
to
about
talk
it, yeah,
about, but is meticulously researched. So yeah, I think we can safely say that's true.
yeah. South Dakota became a state in November of 1889. And a big part of the show is the preparations being made to become a state, to not be invaded, but instead be annexed.
Yeah.
So it charts the growth of a camp, a mining camp, into a town. Uh, it is was created by David Milch, who you, the listener, are familiar with his work in some way. We'll find out how pretty soon.
I think this is a good moment for us to say this is somewhat unbelievable to you and I, even still, after all these years of doing the show. But we have many listeners who listen to our episodes, even if they have never interacted with the thing we're talking about.
And
And
thank you
if
for that
so,
if you do that.
so if you're a listener and you've never seen Deadwood, but you're still listening and you're like, I know this is a thing that exists that people talk about sometimes, but you have no idea about David Milch. He is strangely central to, I think, like um, uh, television industry
Yeah, the late
of
90s, early
probably the last
2000s is
50 years.
David Milchland.
I'd say
And
longer than that. I mean, he was writing for Hill Street Blues in the 80s.
he was writing for them, yes. But I'm saying like David Milch as a force that, oh, you're
Yeah.
familiar with his stuff, I think. But also that's less important.
But this is a moment that I want to put a pin in. You and I are huge fans of this show. And so we have a reverence for him. But I also think that we need to pull back from that a little bit and try to look at this man objectively. I want to read some of the credits here because when I went and I sat down and I looked at his credits, I
Oh,
was like,
wait,
holy
Chris.
cow.
Chris, you're jumping ahead. There's two things I have to plant a couple flags before you get into
Oh,
David
more
Milch Mad
flags.
Genius.
We talk about pins and flags all the time now.
I've just taken it from you. I feel like sometimes you misuse the terms, but I kind of like it. It's
Absolutely.
part of my love for you that you're like, I'm going to put a pin in this flag on top of this balloon.
Hmm.
Okay, Deadwood is a mix of real characters and events. Excuse me, real life people as characters and real life events as narrative, and also completely made up stuff. It
Hmm.
is a an amalgamation of narrative, fiction, nonfiction, and historical fact. It also attempted a veracity of language, which required some artificiality, meaning where the language of Deadwood was probably harsh, in that cowboys used words like crap and box for the vagina. That Milch thought would be silly to try and recreate.
What Western did you see before Deadwood where somebody referred to a vagina as a box?
Well, no, no, this is from the research. Like this is
Oh,
literally
okay.
what
I
Milch
thought
talked
you were
about.
like saying like bonanza or something.
No, 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 no. The actuality of filthy language in the late
Okay.
1800s
Sure.
sounds ridiculous now. You know,
Gotcha. Yeah.
the beyond the pale language is probably what you'd hear on a in a PG-13 movie or something like that. So Milch took the nature of the profanity and attempted to create a anachronistic but psychologically correct profanity in his show,
Hmm.
which meant that words like cocksucker were thrown around um, without care. Um, uh, I hope as a Christian man, you will assess this deal on its own fucking merits, you know, things like that. It is an insanely profane show.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and
But
probably
also,
far beyond any analogous profanity at the time.
yeah, I mean, you're jumping way ahead in our notes right now, but I think something we'll find both Milch felt and I think some of the people surrounding him felt is that that was simply like a strategic decision in the writing,
Yeah,
in the planning of
to
this
to
show
try and create the thing. Yeah,
because of America and how um without getting like proselytizing about this, we have a strange hypocritical relationship with language and sex and violence. And because of that, there was an obsession about the language in this show,
Yeah.
specifically the swearing. And there's to this day there still is, right? Like I
Like
think
I'm doing it
there's
right now.
you are, yeah. And there were hundreds of articles that were obsessed with it, and that's all they talked about. They didn't talk about the quality of the show. They talked about how many swears were in this show. And there's like YouTube videos that are literally just like they just count how many times people swear in the show. And I think there's some direct quotes from Milch here. We'll get to them, but he's kind of like, yes, but that's not the point.
Yeah. But if you're coming into this with no knowledge of Deadwood, this is the superficial stuff you need to know.
This is the kind of stuff like if your parents watched this show, they would tell you about it in their initial review. Like,
Yeah.
oh my, I mean, we watched an episode, but there
So
was just
rude.
far too much swearing. Why did everybody have to talk to each other like that?
All right. Well, now you have, dear listener, a very superficial set of qualities, and we're going to dig in deep and see what we find. So, Chris, I now pull my pin away and I push the flag to the side. Tell me about David Milch.
Well, I've always thought David Milch created Deadwood. He worked on those cop shows. Um, but I didn't realize like he's got a credit list like as long as your arm.
Mm-hmm.
He's created so many shows that did not go anywhere. That there were it really kind of made me step aside and be like, "Oh, is Deadwood like a fluke or like what's going on here?" So here's a list of the shows. Beverly Hill Bunts, Capital News, NYPD Blue is the other big one that everybody knows him for. Brooklyn South, Big Apple, Total Security. This one I know, but I've never watched. John from Cincinnati. I think that was the follow-up to Deadwood, right?
Well, here's the wild thing. John from Cincinnati was such a not going to hit show that even being the next show that Milch did after Deadwood, it just didn't fly.
Yeah, yeah. Last of the Ninth. Luck is another one that I'm familiar with, but I never watched. And The Money. Have you watched any of these?
I watched 3 episodes of John from Cincinnati. I watched 1 episode of Luck. I have never seen NYPD Blue, but I have heard all of the discourse. You know,
Yeah, when you and I were growing up, the discourse about that was similar to Deadwood, where it was like,
very
"Oh my
much so.
God, there's butts on this show." Like
Yeah,
that's
and
what everybody was obsessed with.
there's drunks and people who kill people on this show and all
Yeah.
that. Um, John from Cincinnati was like, um, okay, you do you, buddy. That's how that show felt to me.
I keep trying to bring myself to watch it because I'm like, this guy created my favorite TV show of all time. I should give him the time of day with these other things, but I haven't been able to do it.
And Luck should have been a home run, and it just didn't feel good. Here's the other thing about David Milch. He was practically an English professor. Like I think he went to Yale and then taught at Yale after writing in English literature.
So
He
yeah,
is
you sent over an article that somewhat explains this. I don't want to get too deep into it because there's a lot of mythologizing about his time at Yale. But yes, he was a student there and he was talented and recognized as talented by the faculty. But he also was surly and somewhat violent and had a substance abuse problem. And still, the faculty who came to love him, one of which was Robert Penn Warren, were like, "You should come teach here." And so they hired him.
yeah,
I don't think he was a professor. I think he was what we would call an adjunct
sorry, yeah, an
today.
instructor.
Yeah,
Milch was a student in the 60s and taught in the 70s, basically.
yeah.
And Robert Penn Warren is a big deal. Like, that's a lot. Um, the son of one of Milch's mentors at Yale said in the 1970s, recognizing David's brilliance and promise, they invited him to become their colleague at Yale. During the decade or so that he spent at Yale, David taught writing and literature and assisted Warren and R.W.B. Lewis and their colleague Cleanth Brooks on their anthology, American Literature, The Makers and the Making. So his he's a little bit like David Simon in that coming from a different realm
Yeah.
of media production, then moved into TV.
I thought about David Simon a lot while I was reading this stuff. And I know we haven't done an episode on The Wire, but I think David Simon is an interesting contrast to Milch in that my understanding, maybe we need to do an episode on The Wire, but my understanding of David Simon, he's a relatively stable, humane person. And David Milch and his talks about himself and people around him talk about him as like being capable of being a real bastard.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, he was the kind of addict that wrecks people's lives.
yeah, I did not put this quote into the research, but there was a quote from the same article um, that Milch essentially said after his time at Yale, he went to Iowa. I think he was studying in grad school at Iowa, and at the time he was there, he said, you know, at that time you just assumed that anybody who was a writer was also a drunk, that those two things went hand in hand. And he said all of the writers on the faculty were drunks. And
Yeah.
he specifically called out Kurt Vonnegut. Kurt Vonnegut was on the faculty while he was there. And apparently they did not like each other, Vonnegut and Milch.
I mean,
Um,
how could they have?
right, right. But so this is gives you a little bit of an idea of where he's coming from. I think the important thing to say is that before Deadwood, he got sober. And he wasn't just a drunk, like he was a heroin addict.
Yeah, he was a mess. But he was in the academy in the 70s. And then in the 80s, he started writing for TV. He started writing for television with Hill Street Blues. He became a writer there by sending them a script. That first show, Beverly Hills Bunts, that you were talking about,
Yeah.
that was a Hill Street Blues spinoff.
Oh,
And I guess he created it, wrote the first script, launched it, whatever. Uh, and Franz, what Dennis Franz, the
yeah.
actor, he was
Yeah.
in that too. So like that's kind of
Okay.
starting to
So
connect to
those guys
NYPD
made
Blue and all
three
that.
shows together then.
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about Milch as a writer though, because he's not. Some TV writers that we have read their discussion of their writing, it's very pragmatic. How do you write a script? How do you get something on TV? What's the best thing for television?
Yeah.
Milch sounds like, and I'm just going to be kind of reductive about it, he sounds like a writer. He sounds like an author talking about the process and how it changes themselves and how they, um, become something, how they think their way to, or how they write their way to thinking and that kind of thing.
Well, I think there's two things we should say before we get into these quotes. Number one, we've already established that he was an academic first. So he thinks about writing the way English academics in the 70s thought about writing. And we've talked about that. There's been a huge shift in thinking
Yeah.
in literary departments since then. But he very much has that way of talking about things. And you said it yourself in our emails back and forth about this. His quotes are very pretentious
Mm-hmm.
and in a way that you can
Gloriously
recognize
so, I believe is what I said.
genius. Yeah, he's a genius. And as you're reading it, you're like, no real human being talks like this, but apparently he does.
Yeah. So here's one of those quotes. I try consciously to frustrate the impulse to think about a scene before I sit down to it because the highfalutin expression, you can't think your way to right action. You can only act your way to right thinking. First off,
Yeah,
what the
that's an
fuck?
expression everybody knows.
Yeah, good God. But also, like, this is what that sounds almost like a quote from Deadwood.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
the punctuation within it, the full paragraphs. Now, I saw some video of David Milch writing on set
We're
of
there's
Deadwood,
notes about this,
and
and
yeah,
I
and
was
that's
going to
that's
bring
what
it up
leads us
too.
into here.
Hmm.
So, in a profile of Milch by Mark Singer in the New Yorker, he said Milch relies on a computer but never touches the mouse or the keyboard himself because he's learned such mechanical tasks offer too many opportunities for obsessive compulsive distraction. Like, good on you, Milch, but also maybe come on down with the rest of us. Okay.
Let's talk about privilege for a second. I
During
can't I
production.
can't let myself touch a
Okay.
keyboard.
All right. Hey, if we get into privilege, we'll never finish this episode. During production, this is back to the profile. Each morning, a driver would deliver him from his home in Santa Monica to Melody Ranch Studios, and that's where they shot Deadwood, where a half dozen or so people would be waiting to join him in the living room of a trailer. While the others sat on a sofa or chairs, Milch reclined on the floor in the center of the room, a few feet from a microphone and a 20-inch computer monitor, on the other side of which was a desk where an amanuensis, is that how you say that?
I think so.
Seated in front of a computer and another monitor, was poised to type whatever he dictated. Now, I saw this in
Yeah, I
one
saw
of
it
those,
too. It's on the DVD
yeah,
extras.
Deadwood.
That's where we saw it. Hmm.
And, there was a good 5 minutes where he wrote and rewrote a line that I remember from the show. Um, and it was what did someone once said? The Coen brothers writing was like watching paint dry.
Mm-hmm.
That is what it felt like. That here's this guy and he's just going to get the right. When this is all over, when come to the end of all this, there will be no peer. I will have no peer at the end of this. Like that
And you're
kind of
not
thing.
even doing the punctuation.
Oh
He did
God,
it the
yeah.
same way like you watch your parents talking to Siri, or they're like,
Comma.
okay, when, comma, a, like, like that. And so I want to say this, like back in 2004, when I watched that DVD, I guess it was 2005, um, I, I watched that and I thought, wow, this guy's a genius, but also the gall of this man to be like, okay, everybody who's a quote unquote writer on this show, your job is to just stand in front of the keyboard and type what I tell you.
By the time Milch got to writing Deadwood or being on the set of Deadwood, he was in a place where he had the money and status that Liz Sarnoff, I'm quoting again, Liz Sarnoff and Jody Welch, two staff writers, were always present, along with 3 or 4 young aspiring writers, interns whom Milch paid out of his own pocket to learn by silently observing. Now, one of the writers on the show says, this is Ted Mann. He says, 13 people sitting in a windowless room watching one person talk to a screen. No thanks. I don't think I would have wanted to watch William Faulkner write either, which is fun. So Ted Mann's a writer who knows what he's doing. And he's like, I'm not getting in there. I'm not doing this thing. But
Yeah.
also he couldn't help but compare Milch to Faulkner in that moment too.
Hmm. Hmm.
Oh,
So there's a little bit here about the pilot, which ostensibly, if he wrote the pilot on his own without a writer's room formed yet, I don't think he was talking to the screen. He actually had to deign to put his fingers on a keyboard.
I don't know. He could have had, I mean, the
Maybe he had an intern for that.
saying amanuensis. I don't know how to say that word correctly,
I think it's amanuensis.
but essentially a very closely connected secretary, like literally secretary,
Hmm.
not the gendered secretary, but a person who followed you, knew you, wrote your stuff, helped
Yeah.
you. I think this is probably a thing that he was doing for a while. We'll get to
Hmm.
it later, but he had a deal that was extraordinarily
Yeah.
um, I was going for a word. I was going for a Milch word. He had so much fucking money when he was working in this time that he could have hired somebody pretty easily.
So when he wrote the pilot, which was in 2003, he spent 2 years before that. So he started in 2001 and he researched nothing but the history of the West in Deadwood for 2 years. He researched gold mining, wars with Native Americans, whorehouses, casino protocols, public health records, politics in the Black Hills, criminality and extralegal justice, the banking panic of 1873, and the biographies of historical figures. Now, this sounds like, okay, he says that, but come on. But then when you get quotes with him in interviews, it is like you're talking to an expert in that region. He knows everything.
This made me feel so much better about what I have been doing myself recently. So I've created an accountability community out of folks in Super Context and some of my coworkers and this grad school program that I'm applying to. I'm writing a book. It's a novel. It's at its core, it's a thriller. I don't need to do the research, but I have, like, if I just look over here, I have one, two, three, four, five, six, 7 books of research on this thing I'm writing about. Most of what that is, most of what's in those books, I'm not going to write on the page. But I have
Yes.
been sucking up all the things that might inform what the characters will do, what might inform plot points. I have taken apart, I've like an old car, I've taken apart, my plot and put it back together.
Hmm.
And it feels like, oh, yeah, this is a good way to do things. I like the idea of doing things this way because I see how it worked for Milch. He has very few characters sit down and give a speech about how America came together, but everybody has a thing or two to say about everything going on.
Um, yeah, I mean, I would pause for that. I think it's admirable that you're doing that. I didn't know you were doing that. There's things we have apparently not talked about. But I
You've had
would
a lot on
say
your mind, Chris.
I have. It's been a rough couple months, but um, I think this is also the mythologizing, though. Milch is very firmly in that generation and cultural space of the mythologizing of the writer. That this is what a writer does is a writer goes away for a few years and they research their topic and they are wildly drunk the whole time and they are derogatory to everybody around them. And then they finally sit down and they put the words on paper.
Yeah,
So, I want to be careful of too much mythologizing because
I
I
hear
think
you.
I
You're
think some of that is him and some of it is us. I also think that there's got to be a point where the research stops and the work happens.
for
And
sure. But
I
I am
remember a quote.
mythologizing the actual show. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. No, I
the
just want
end
to say,
result
like, I
of
remember a
this
quote
crazy ass
from
motherfucker is actually a show that I adore.
that's exactly, yeah. Like he did the work, like he got it done, right? And like we all watched it and we're like, whoa, holy shit. But I also think that the circumstances that he was able to do this under were lightning in a bottle
Oh,
and
for
like
sure.
will never happen again.
Because listen to this. Last spring and summer, the article says, as the first season's episodes were being aired, Milch convened the writers and interns for several weeks to explore how characters, themes, and storylines might evolve, and the transcriptions of those sessions totaled hundreds of single spaced pages.
Mm.
He totally had like focus group meetings just about like, hey, what are we going to do here? Before the writer's room convened for the next year
But
because
that's
he
a
could
story
afford to.
Bible. Every
Yeah.
TV show does that.
I don't think every TV show does that off season. So this is basically like having a retreat, you know?
Yeah. Well, the difference here is he could pay these people to
Yeah,
have a
that's what I'm
retreat and
talking
he
about.
could pay for the place for them to go to. Other showrunners probably weren't in a position to do that. We'll talk about why he was in a position to do that.
Now, here's a funny thing against all of this stuff you've been saying about Milch and sort of self aggrandizing and all that. To gain access to his characters, Milch says his strategy is to make himself disappear. Citing William James in The Varieties of Religious Experience, he asserts that all apprehensions of the deity have in common ego suppression at depth. But it's not as if I just go with the flow. I spent a lot of fucking time studying these characters and trying to feel my way into them. And I feel that once you've done that sort of research and rived into your sense of the characters, is that rived or lived?
Yeah, it says rived.
Let me real quick see if, oh, yeah, there we go. To riv means to split, tear apart, or cleave violently. God
Yep.
damn.
Yep.
Fuck this guy.
This guy's a living thesaurus.
I
I
feel
couldn't
that
even get the words
you
out.
can't even say it. And I feel that once you've done this sort of research and rived into your sense of the characters, the next essential step of the process is to suppress the self. The way that happens for me is that the only time I'll think about the work is when I'm working. I won't plan it out. Oh, he's a pantser. My belief is anything you're thinking about when you're not in the act of writing is probably useless.
Let's reiterate that. This is not just a statement about writing a TV show. I think this is a statement about life. My belief is anything you are thinking about when you are not in the act of writing is probably useless.
Now, you think that having left out of the sentence to the writing process that he's actually just talking about the world and
I do.
himself? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, the way that he carries himself throughout the world, at least as we see in all of these interviews, and how other people, including his wife, by the way, talk about him. I do. I think that is the kind of person he is. And I want to be clear, like, this is not me making a judgment. I think he's probably one of our smartest living writers. And we have not said this, but I think it is a huge tragedy that he's afflicted with Alzheimer's. And my understanding is he's in a senior citizens home. He has been for the last like 7 years
Yeah.
because he needs help functioning.
I don't know if it's 7 years, but yeah, like Deadwood the
It's
movie, which
it's yeah, he started with Deadwood the movie. He
yeah,
was diagnosed.
that
Yeah.
was his elegy to himself in a way.
It's heartbreaking, you know. But I also like I don't know. I find myself as a writer looking at this and going, do I want to be this person? No. I do I wish I could write like this? Of course, but is it worth this?
Right. Well, going back to, is this lightning in a bottle? Was this like the peak? Was this just, did he luck out on this one? I mean, I feel like the answer to all those questions is yes. It worked out really well for him, the way that he wrote and the way he did things. It was in the middle of this very expensive production deal. He was of an age that he'd gotten past some of his full-on addict behaviors, but
Yeah.
hadn't started to slow down yet. And also, the thing he was writing about had built-in constraints that he was navigating well,
Hmm.
in the sense that this was a real place and a real moment in time with real people.
Yeah.
And he messed with the history. Like Wild Bill Hickok and Seth Bullock were never in Deadwood at the same time in life,
Hmm.
but in the show, them running into each other and acting together briefly,
Yeah.
having agency together briefly, is a key part of the story.
It's the inciting
uh,
event of the show.
yeah,
It's how the pilot ends. Yeah.
but he had to, where am I going with this? He had to operate within uh, a very different kind of imaginary than any of his other shows. Luck is
Mm-hmm.
about horse racing. NYPD Blue is about cops. Hill Street Blue is about cops. The big money, I assume, is about the big money. These things. But Deadwood,
Cops gambling. That's probably
yeah,
what the
there you
big
go.
money
That's what
is
that's
about.
about. He's using diaries and newspapers as the backing of what he was doing.
Hmm.
Here's more from the notes. Milch says, I started out with the actual historical figures and then moved to the historical figures who ought to have been, which is kind of wonderful. And then the interviewer says, I guess it was the blanks in their biographies that interested you. The interstices, the blanks in the historical account that invite the operation of the imagination, were what engaged me. The portrayal of Wild Bill Hickok is probably the best example of that. As I read about Hickok, the thing that struck me over and over again was, well, the contemporary expression is suicide by cop. Here's a guy who is looking to get killed.
Let's back up for a second because that's a real like uh in the know quote. Like if you've never seen the show, so Wild Bill Hickok goes to Deadwood within the context of the show, maybe not in real life, to die. He is a gambling addict. He's an alcoholic,
Well, the
and
reality is that he went to Deadwood and he was killed in Deadwood. And
yes, but
everyone
within the
says
show,
it's so weird that Wild Bill Hickok was shot in the back of the head because he always,
yeah.
sat with his back to the wall and he was a great gunfighter and all that. So
And the
Milch
idea
takes
here
that.
is that Milch was like, no, he must have had a reason for doing that.
And that is the narrative. That's like the plot line of the first half of the show is Wild Bill Hickok asking Charlie Utter, let me go to hell the way I want to.
Yeah.
Uh, Milch also talks about the fact that he was writing an ensemble cast.
Mm.
I try to avoid identifying with one character. I experience all these characters as a single organism. These are all characters discovering their constituency in the larger single organism of the camp. Chris, I think that this is the key to why Deadwood is the one that broke free and was so much more successful, so much more culturally important,
Hmm.
except maybe for NYPD Blue. But even that, I don't think about NYPD Blue now.
Nobody goes back and rewatches NYPD Blue on DVD,
I
or at
hope that
least,
whoever listens to us and does
yeah,
emails and
yeah,
says, you
they
don't have to be
will.
rude about it. You just
Yeah,
say, I totally watch NYPD Blue for
maybe
comfort.
they do. Maybe they do.
But this is a
Um,
show about a community, and it actually operated in that way. It wasn't like, oh, here's the star, and they interact with everyone. It was
well,
more, here's this kind of flowing ensemble
I think my
interacting.
takeaway from this quote, though, too, and it's a realization I'm just having after probably watching the first season 3 times, is um, if he is writing the entire town of Deadwood as one organism, then I think it's fair to say, yes, he's a genius writer, and I'm not saying that he writes all characters the same, but I think it's fair to say that the actors are really responsible for putting the spin of unique characterization on each of these people.
Yeah.
Because on paper, Al Swearengen's lines are not all that different from Ellsworth's lines, right? At least in the way that they talk.
And yet it plays so different. Like it's
Yeah.
real alchemy kind of stuff. Now, there's some more of Milch's kind of production or preparation. He he was a glutton for research and for excitement and drugs and alcohol, whatever. Singer writes, this is the New Yorker profile. When he began researching the town, which is now a tourist destination, he
This is
discovered there
this
was
is
a
my
yeah.
favorite story.
He discovered that there was a museum in Deadwood where he could examine artifacts, historical documents, and photographs. And here's the important part. At one point, a horse trainer friend put him in touch with Gary LeFew, a world champion bull rider who operates a rodeo school on the central coast of California. Ever since, LeFew and several other cowboys have been on Milch's personal payroll. Like the interns and other folks in recovery who find their way into Milch's orbit, all are beneficiaries of a largesse that one of his friends described to me as the Milch Scholarship Program.
So let's back up what this means. This means like out of his own pocket, he's paying, it sounds like a dozen people at least.
Yeah, no, listen to this. LeFew is telling the story. He's told David that I told David what he needed to see was the spirit of the people who were here. The rodeo, the restless bunch, people with gold fever. I said the best you can get to that is the modern day rodeo cowboy. Let me bring in 8 or 10 of the wildest, craziest, most fun loving bunch I ever knew in this game. When you're riding bulls, you only work 8 seconds a day. You have a lot of time on your hands. You're either fighting, fucking, or doing something that's kind of wild. And David Milch liked the idea. LeFew said, I called these guys, told him, David just wants you to come spend a few days with him. You can show him how to have a really good time and he'll pay for everything. He wasn't drinking, but he was willing to observe. I was making reservations on Southwest Airlines, but hell, Milch sent a Learjet to pick everybody up except some folks from Canada who got first class. Put them up in $400 a night rooms in Santa Monica. All the whiskey, all the fun, anything they wanted to do, just name it and we'd do it. Milch, I mean, by his own admission, Milch is a drunk and a drug addict. And when he was sober, which all signs point to him being sober at the time that this is all happening,
Hmm.
he was throwing money everywhere. He liked to gamble. He bet on horses. That's kind of how he connected with horse trainers and whatnot. That's why Luck got written.
Oh yeah, I suppose these guys must have come into play with luck at some point.
Yeah.
His coterie of ne'er-do-wells that he established and paid to just follow him around. So the thing
I think
here
he paid
is,
so he could follow them around because he put them up in apartments. He created an entourage, but then he just observed them.
but then it says here they stuck around because Milch, who is forever appreciative of a good story or an apt simile, enjoyed their company or was grateful to them for helping to confirm what he already knew and in fact had understood about human behavior long before he ever heard of Deadwood. My understanding from this profile is that those people were there for the entire first season. They were just like consultants that were on hand whenever he needed to be. He was laying on the floor in the writer's room. He was like, wait, hold on. Let me call up my cowboy buddy
I
and
hear
see if
you,
he thinks this is accurate.
but I believe that what it really was is that he hung out in Santa Monica with them, and then when he went up to the ranch, he would be like, "Okay, right," and then remember the thing: anything you think about when you're not writing is useless. He
Right.
just like laid it all in there.
Yeah.
He was thinking of all these people at the time and probably remembered some of those apt similes that they had, or thinking about how one guy turned and threw a beer bottle or whatever. So this brings us to profanity. Sorry, I laid it out earlier, but let's read some quotes about the language. The funny thing, I'm not reading a quote yet. The funny thing about the language is that it seemed to be people gave themselves permission to enjoy the bad language, quote unquote, bad language,
Yeah.
because Milch's style was so ornate and and sort of flowery, trying to kind of capture some of the it's old timey,
Yeah.
but with very immediate modern profanity and also probably modern ideas about emotions, just hidden kind of behind. So the
Yeah.
journalist Damien Love wrote, "There's no better expression of its unique identity than the extraordinary dialogue Milch gave his extraordinary cast to speak. Much attention has been paid to the burst banks floods, that's kind of nice, of profanity. In Deadwood, obscenities get brandished as weapons and worn as armor, yet are also statements of self identity and even kinship. But the glorious, rich, and roiling strangeness of the language was often missed. Profanities rolled together with archaisms, half remembered formalities, and weird vernaculars, gouting out in great, bluntly poetic magpie locutions of broken backed syntax. For once, the adjective Shakespearean is fully justified." I had a Georgia Tech professor say to me straight up, "Oh, yeah, I think it's at the level of Shakespeare."
I mean, I think that is true as well, but I also think that that is a thing that people say about this show. I think we could probably do a top 10 list of top 10 things people say
Yeah,
about
and
Deadwood
Shakespeare's one
when
of
they're
them. Yeah.
just talking about it, and Shakespeare's one of them. Yeah.
Here's the thing about Shakespearean language: it's not the floweriness or, oh, it's so beautiful. It's that people are speaking their character. The characters are speaking themselves into existence.
I think that's true, but I also think it's lyrical in that the dialogue also has a pace to it that is almost musical. It has a
Yeah,
beat, and that beat draws you in. And at the same time, it's also written so elegantly that it is conveying themes within the dialogue
there
that
you go.
most
Yeah.
writing is not capable of.
It's not just moving around subject, object, and adjective so that it sounds old timey.
Right. Hmm.
Carolyn Strauss is quoted in the Singer piece. Um, Early on, the issue of language came up a lot. This is someone who worked at HBO. "We asked David, are you obscuring your message or the overall acceptability of the piece in a way that may be not necessary?" That seems like it was all. That's a person who's starting to talk like Milch because they spent too much time with him.
Mm.
He felt strongly that it was necessary. He'd done a lot of research. At Strauss's urging, Milch wrote an essay on the subject, 5 single-spaced pages, followed by 4 pages of bibliography, defending realism and freedom of expression as indispensable correctives to the varnished mythologies of the West perpetrated by Hollywood. After quoting from oral histories as well as authorities like H.L. Mencken, Daniel Boorstin, and William Dean Howells, he concluded with an Echt Milch flourish: "If, as seems demonstrable, words like prick, cunt, shit, fuck, and cocksucker would have been in common usage in the time and place in which Deadwood is set, Then, like any words, in form and frequency, their expression will be governed by the personality of a given character, imagined by the author with whatever imperfection as the character is shaped and tested in the crucible of experience. The goal is not to offend, but to realize the character's full humanness. Chris, would you like to say some shit about Milch at this moment?
I mean, again, like this is it's funny. He used the term highfalutin earlier, and like I see him constantly portraying himself as a highfalutin writer. But at the same time, everything he's saying is true, right? Like the logic lines up. The story is amazing. Like the end product is exactly what he intended it to be. So it's hard to argue with it.
Stephen Bacco, who co-created NYPD Blue with David Milch, he said, David had more miles on him the day I met him than I'll probably have the day I die. He'll wrestle his demons forever, but I've never known anyone else who has learned to put his demons at his service in quite the way he has. I think that's his real genius. And David is a genius in the literal definition of that word. He is truly unique, truly original. And then his wife said this about him. Rita Stern said, the thing with David is he's like the girl with the curl. When he's good, he's very, very good. And when he's bad, he's horrid. There's nobody I've ever met as smart and as funny and as generous. He's just the best.
Yeah, so I mean, these are two people who are extremely close to him, and it seems like they have a very measured idea of who he is as a person. This is not just you and me having like a subjective read on him. And then there's some quotes too that we didn't include because this episode's gonna be long as is, but
Yeah.
Milch says things like this about himself too.
Yeah. He's
He's
aware. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. David Milch created Deadwood. He wrote the pilot script. It was directed by Walter Hill. Walter Hill is an American filmmaker known for action and Western films like The Warriors, 48 Hours, The Long Riders, Southern Comfort, and a bunch of other movies. He was also executive producer on the Alien series. Now, he only directed the pilot. And the reason that he only directed the pilot was because uh, there was some time between the pilot and the series getting picked up. I don't know how much of that was about Walter leaving or just like gave him time to. But then he said he departed the project because of a falling out. This is from an interview with Collider. I won't bore you with the details, but it had to do with the post production process. I had no problems during the shoot, and I admire David Milch's script a great deal, but there was a disagreement about the editing. Hill says he didn't like how they were doing transitions, that they did some very nice transitions, but then they were cutting them out. We had some really elegant ones. They just chopped those out. But he says, I still have very positive feelings about the whole thing. I thought it was a good piece of work. The prep and the casting and all that went really well, and I had a strong hand in it. I still watched the show, was quite disappointed when they canceled it, which as far as I could tell was for no good reason. The reason was money. Hill says the characters were really good. We worked them out in the pilot, and to be fair, many of the others that came after were just as good. I do think that it got a little too self reflexive in a way that was not wildly healthy, but that's just an easy opinion. And, I didn't take my name off of it or anything like that. I liked it. I think there's some distinct differences between the pilot and the rest of the season.
Hmm.
And I want to, they're subjective, obviously, but I want to throw them at you and see if that you agree.
Yeah.
The lighting was very different for the rest of the season. And that's a very technical, but also I think that Swearingen's character is the most explicitly changed between pilot and second episode, both
Hmm.
in appearance and also the room for redemption.
Um, I don't, so it's been a minute since I've rewatched these, so I don't feel confident enough in saying that I agree with you about the lighting or anything like that. But I think something that I learned again, like doing the research on this, is that while David Milch is this like mad genius, a lot of the people that he brought in to work on this show are career TV people.
Mm-hmm.
And I've talked about this a little bit since we brought the show back. I'm in this movie club right now, and every 2 weeks we watch one of the movies that's on Sight and Sound's
Yeah.
top 100 list. And it's made me watch movies that I've always wanted to watch that I've never gotten around to. And to really appreciate like good directing and directing that's very different from I think like our American sensibility of what good direction is. And I was thinking about it when I was looking at this research, and I was like, Deadwood is an amazing show. It's my, again, tied for my favorite show of all time. But I don't think what makes Deadwood amazing is the direction. It's the writing, it's the acting, and it's the set design. Like you're immersed in the world. But there's no point where I'm like, wow, like look at look at the way in
Yeah.
which they like framed that shot or anything. And I know you have a soft spot for Walter Hill, but like his resume, I don't understand why people think he's like so amazing. Like those movies are all pretty like solid C movies to me. I know
Oh
that's like I just stabbed
gosh.
you in the stomach.
I mean, I was with you up until the C. All
I
right.
mean, what is your favorite Walter Hill movie?
Hmm. Maybe the Warriors.
Warriors is a fun movie,
Yeah.
but it's not like a work of art. I think we can all agree.
It's not a work of art, and that's
Yeah.
important.
Yeah.
Here's the thing I want to call out with the Walter Hill versus the other directors, and I think you just said
Yeah.
it. Walter Hill made movies, and the rest of the directors made TV. Not
Yeah.
only,
Yeah.
and several of those directors were highly accomplished television directors who tried to make some movies that maybe didn't quite get over.
Yeah, let's skip ahead for a second. I
Okay.
know it's a little further ahead in the notes, but
Well,
let's
let me
look at the
make a point
folks.
about Walter Hill before we skip ahead, and that'll be kind
Yeah.
of easy. He is obviously a key part of putting the show together. Keith
Sure.
Carradine is Wild Bill Hickok because Walter Hill called him someone they had worked with.
Oh, I didn't know that really.
Yeah, and it's clear though that the group of directors who made this great show, they were not Walter Hill, and maybe he was supposed to be around for a little bit longer. You and I just watched Widow's Bay.
Hmm.
Hiro Murai did the first three and the last two episodes of a 10 episode season,
Hmm.
basically set the style and then made sure it came to a close the same way.
Yeah, it's what's his name? Carrie from True Detective, first season of True Detective. This is
Yeah.
an HBO model. Like you have a showrunner who's the writer, but you also bring in a director who's a really high quality director who does half the season, but is also kind of around to in the same way that Milch is wrangling the writers' room.
Yeah.
I'm assuming Walter Hill would have like overseen these other folks.
So I think that might have been the plan. It didn't go
Yeah.
well because I think there was enough time for him to be pissed off about the editing.
Yeah, and you know, I can't imagine either of those guys are easy to get along with, and then you put them in the room together for too long, and it's probably fireworks, right?
Yeah.
All right, so this is the directors. We don't have to like dig through this whole thing, but I was kind of surprised again because like this show is, you know, heralded as one of the greatest shows of all time. Davis Guggenheim directed 4 episodes. He specializes in documentaries. So, An Inconvenient Truth is like the biggest movie he's made, but he's also worked on,
I think
again,
Waiting
true.
for a Superman was the other one.
Oh, yeah, he did that too. But career TV, NYPD Blue, ER, 24, Alias, The Shield. You're going to see NYPD Blue over and over and over
Yeah.
again on these people's resumes.
But then
Milch is
also,
working with people he knew already.
yeah. But then also there's folks who had like a an in on HBO. Like
Exactly.
Alan Taylor, he directed one episode, and he came from working Homicide, Life on the Street, Oz, The West Wing, Rome. Oh, that would be later. Sopranos, Sex and the City. He would end up on the Mad Men team and Game of Thrones. Also, he directed Thor: The Dark World.
Right. Right. That was like in Terminator Genesis. Like I was like, whoa, that alone, like those two movies are somehow connected by 5 degrees to
Yep,
Deadwood.
they
Weird.
are. Ed
Ed
Bianchi,
Bianchi.
he he directed two episodes. He was also on Homicide, Life on the Street. You see his name on The Wire all the time.
This one is wild, Charlie.
Do it.
He directed the dance sequence on The Cosby Show. the like the infamous like Bill Cosby dancing alone by himself in a room while the credits played over him. That's Ed Bianchi.
And let's leave it at that. Michael Engler directed one episode. He was a theater director, also worked on HBO shows Dream On, 6 Feet Under, Sex and the City, and then stuff like My So-Called Life, Party of Five, Chicago. I mean,
Yeah,
TV.
like these are kind of surprising though, right? Like they either fall into one of two categories. Like you're either a known quantity for HBO and they know like you can do the job and we can trust you behind a camera, or you've worked in television for a long time
Yeah.
and you've done a little bit of everything.
Daniel Minahan directed 2 episodes, and he was an HBO part of the HBO stable. We'll say 6 Feet Under,
Yeah.
True Blood, Newsroom, Game of Thrones. Some of those are after.
Yeah.
Like this, I think 6 Feet Under happened before Deadwood. The others happened after.
But
And
this is he's a standout for me
yeah,
because
because he
he
wrote.
also wrote and directed I Shot Andy Warhol, which is again like I don't know if you've seen that movie. It's not like my favorite movie, but it's like a really original, creative idea in the same way that Deadwood is.
I feel like there's a ton of working, highly successful television directors who have a dream project that they did
Yeah.
that didn't hit. And I don't mean it was bad. It just didn't hit. Didn't become a thing that everyone's like, give me more of that. But they make a great living, directing TV.
Yeah. Yeah.
The last director, Steve Schill, has worked on EastEnders, Sopranos, The Wire, Rome, Carnival, Big Love, The Tudors, Dexter, Knight Rider. I mean, Law and Order, ER, The West Wing, The Good Wife. That was one episode. So yeah, there wasn't this kind of Davis Guggenheim was the closest to a style setting director, but Davis Guggenheim came in after Walter Hill did the pilot.
Well, so let me, I want to be clear. Like, I'm not denigrating the resumes of these people. Like, they're all
Yeah.
clearly very successful Hollywood filmmakers. But with a project like this, even Walter Hill was too much for David Milch to be in the same room as. Can you imagine if they were like, I know this person was probably not even alive when Deadwood was made, but they were like, let's have Andrei Tarkovsky do the
Sure.
pilot. You know
Sure.
what I mean? Like you want career people working on the show alongside this sort of unstable madman who's running everything.
Well, I mean, I'm sure that Walter Hill was connected because he was brought in by the HBO folks. You know, let's get
Oh, you think
Walter.
so? You
I
don't think that was
I do
Milch's idea?
because there's really not a lot. He says, "Oh, I like the script. I didn't take my
Mm.
name off it." It wasn't. He doesn't
Mhm.
say anything about, "Oh yeah, David, my mad genius friend that I did a favor for," or anything like that.
I think the other thing that sort of I got from reading in between the lines in the research is that David Milch is an amazing writer, but another quality of his that I don't think enough people talk about is like he's also capable of navigating within this like complex bureaucratic system of television producers and getting things done, or at least getting them to greenlight things.
It seems like he can dazzle them with brilliance or baffle them with bullshit.
I have a good way for us to transition back from where we are to where we were supposed to be, which was with actors.
Okay.
I only just learned this. I know you know this already, but
Okay.
it blew my mind. Keith Carradine, who played Wild Bill Hickok and is in many other things,
Yes.
was the brother of Robert Carradine from
Did you
Revenge of the
not fucking
Nerds.
know that?
I did not know that.
What is wrong
I
with
didn't
you?
know those three guys were all brothers. I just thought they had the same
just
last
thought
name.
Carradine was just thought
Yeah.
Carradine was Smith. Oh my God. Chris,
Totally blew my mind. Yeah.
I'm deeply disappointed in you. Keith Carradine played Wild Bill Hickok in the first 4 episodes of Deadwood season 1. He is the ghost that haunts the season. He is the reason Seth Bullock's character changes the way it does, like all this stuff. Keith Carradine, you probably have seen, no matter whether you know his name or not.
I like that in your notes it says Keith Carradine was also in The Big Bang Theory.
Well, here's the thing about Keith Carradine. I wanted to get in a little bit on him because, okay, so Keith Carradine played Wild Bill Hickok,
Yeah.
and Wild Bill Hickok is sort of the the dead soul of season one of Deadwood. You know, he was the movie actor in a lot of ways, and then Wild Bill was the character that people probably knew his name, more than anybody else.
Hmm.
But he shows up looking to be killed in the show. The actor Keith Carradine, brother of David, brother of Robert, I think of him as a legendary actor. And the thing when I was kind of trying to summarize him that hit me was that he jumped generational boundaries because he started on Broadway, not Broadway, sorry, he started um, on stage and in small parts, but he has been on Broadway. He also was in Robert Altman movies, McCabe and Mrs. Miller in Nashville. He was then in Walter Hill movies like The Long Riders and Southern Comfort. But his career continued. He was on Big Bang Theory. He was the dad of one of the main characters. He was in Fargo. He was the dad of Molly. And then he was in Dexter. And I don't think he was someone's dad in that. I think that he was the
Was
cop
he
that was chasing Dexter,
the
maybe.
serial killer of the week? I never really watched Dexter.
No, I thought he was along. I'm going to take a moment.
Well, while you do that, I'm going to say this. I say this with love, Charlie, but you, Charlie, there are specific things from your young life, specific media artifacts that you really connect with that I don't know necessarily are universal for other folks. And I think Keith Carradine's resume might be one of those
Okay, I
because
hear you.
I don't know anybody who's like, oh my God, McCabe and Mrs. Miller
No,
and the
no, no,
Long
no.
Rider. You know what I mean?
That's
Like,
fine. That's fine. But I'm saying that a guy who was big in the 70s, a lead
yeah,
actor, then ended up
I'm not
in
disagreeing with you on that. Yeah.
television that was important
Yeah.
later.
And you can feel it in the pilot too.
Yeah.
Like he is exuding so much gravitas. And I think in a lot of ways, I mean, um, uh, sorry, I call him Clench. Timothy Oliphant. I'll tell you why I call him Clench in a minute.
Okay.
Timothy Oliphant, I think, obviously, like, is amazing in the pilot too, and throughout the whole season. But I think he learned a lot, maybe, from Keith Carradine in those first few episodes of Deadwood.
I think he must have. Uh,
Um, do you remember Television Without Pity? That was like
I
an
do.
early message board that
Yeah,
where
yeah,
people
yeah.
used to talk about TV the day after it would air. On Television Without Pity, Timothy Oliphant was referred to as Clench, that because of how he clenched his jaw all the
I'll roll
time. So
with
it was
that. That's good.
shorthand. So I always think of him as Clench in my head.
So I just have to close the loop on Carradine because we brought him up. He essentially got a call from Walter Hill in pre-production for the pilot. Hey, you come play um, Wild Bill now because I've already worked with you. You were in a movie about Wild Bill that I did
Okay.
playing Buffalo Bill Cody. It's your turn to play Wild Bill. And Carradine said um, that this was one of his great experiences. What a role, he said, to have the chance to play, but especially as written by Milch. It was extraordinary stuff. He wrote this kind of American Shakespeare. There it is again. Um, and then when the AV Club, this is where the interview is from, says he's definitely a writer with his own vernacular, Keith Carradine says it's historically accurate. And he would take great pains to point this out to people who would sort of take him to task for the roughness of the language. He'd say, you have to understand that our history of Western movies, what we've been doing in Westerns since the movies began to talk, you had audiences that would be offended by certain things, and there was a cleaning up of the way people spoke.
Sure.
That's what I wanted to pull from that interview.
Yeah.
And also just give Keith Carradine his due.
Oh, yeah, he's amazing. Um, okay. You know what? I'm gonna jump around again. We just moved from actor to, or we went from directors to actor to writer. How about we go from actor to actors and then back to writers?
Okay. So we're in the production section of our
Yeah.
episode, and we're talking about a massive undertaking of a television show. So we're talking about writers, directors, and we could spend all the time on all of the actors, but we're not going to. We're going to very quickly speak to one, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight actors who are in all 12 episodes of the first season.
Let's just say this before we get into these. Murderer's Row of a cast. Like
Fantastic.
everybody in this is amazing. Some people this launched their careers. I mean, just amazing cast.
Ian McShane, who people now know from the John Wick movies, um, it was Al Swearingen. He's an English actor. He was a contemporary of Anthony Hopkins and John Hurt. In fact, he and John Hurt were best buds. They're
Have
in.
you ever seen any early McShane movies?
Oh yes,
I watched this movie years ago called Tamlin, or it's also called The Devil's Widow in America.
yeah,
And it was another like, oh my God, this blew my mind.
yeah.
Like seeing like young, hot, sexy Ian
He's
McShane.
smoking hot. I mean,
Yeah.
he's a very attractive older man, but man, smoking hot.
My first experience with him was Sexy Beast.
He was Lovejoy. He was a rake of an antiques dealer
Yeah,
on
he's
television.
again world class.
Here's a
This
bit about
next bit that
production
you're
though.
about to say is again like insane when you read this out loud.
David Milch did not want Ian McShane for Al Swearingen. He wanted Ed O'Neill. Ed O'Neill was refused by HBO. So then
Uh-huh.
they were going to go for Powers Booth. And Powers Booth is a Walter Hill connection, I think, because Powers
Uh-huh.
Booth is in Long Riders or Southern Comfort with Keith Carradine.
Okay.
I'm guessing that's a connection. But Powers Booth, who passed away from cancer, um, gosh, fairly recently, he
I think it
was,
was before the movie though, right?
yeah, because
Because
he
he's
wasn't in
not
the
in the
movie.
movie.
He was too sick to be part of the pilot. So Ian McShane was chosen partly because the movie Sexy Beast, which turned into an unofficial audition tape for
It's a great
Swearingen.
movie. Yeah.
Timothy Oliphant played Seth Bullock. Timothy Oliphant is a film, TV, and stage actor. You've probably seen him on Conan. He is a charming motherfucker.
He's got an 18 charisma, that's for sure. My first experience with him was probably I'm looking at his resume right now. It was probably Scream 2, but the first thing I remember him in was Go.
Yeah,
Do you
Go is
remember
my
that
first
movie?
with him. Yeah,
Yeah.
love him. Um, this was clearly his breakout role.
Yeah.
And he would, I'm calling it revise it. He revised this role in Justified a little less than 10 years later.
Okay. I'll go along with that. Yeah. I know
It,
there's a lot of talk along those lines that Justified is like a sort of like unofficial sequel to
no,
Deadwood.
no, it's just a joke on Reprise. Like he is a incredibly angry law enforcement officer.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, let's see. Molly Parker played Alma Garrett. I did not know her before, but it turns out I
Oh,
should have. She was a Canadian actress. She started in Canadian television. She was in the movie Men with Brooms with Paul Gross, and she is a steadily working actress. Before and after Deadwood, she's on TV now as the
she's on some doctor drama right now.
I can't
There
remember.
is a Molly Parker movie that I saw before Deadwood that so it's this around the same time as Men with Brooms that just like absolutely cemented her in my brain. It's this erotic thriller with her and Carla Gugino and I think Peter Sarsgaard called The Center of the World.
Holy shit!
It is a Charlie movie. You should look it up because
Okay,
you will love it. But it is capital E erotic thriller, and
maybe
I
I've
was
seen it and refused to admit my
you
response
might,
to it.
it's possible, yeah. But I when she showed up in this show, I was like, oh, I remember her.
All right. Brad Dourif plays Doc Cochran. Oh, be still my heart.
National
Um,
treasure.
Doc Cochran's amazing, especially when he says, fuck the cavalry and the committee that receives it. But Brad Dourif also played Wormtongue in the Lord of the Rings movies. He is
I
the
suppose
voice of
that's what he's
Chucky.
best known for, huh? Is
I think
Worm
the voice
Tongue.
of Chucky is what he's best known for,
Okay.
even though nobody knows that that's him.
He's so good. He's so good. Really, what he should be known for is Alien Resurrection, though.
Oh, man, when he does the teeth.
That Walter Hill. Walter
Yeah.
Hill.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
a connection, yeah.
Yeah.
John Hawkes played Soul Star or Saul Star.
Yeah.
I don't think Deadwood was his breakout. I've thought about this. I think that he was kind of established, and he kept working. But I think that he then got connected to HBO. He was Kenny Powers' brother in Eastbound and Down,
I've never watched that.
and he
Um,
became a huge deal after Winter's Bone. He won awards and got a lot of play in the 2010 movie Winter's Bone.
he was in that most recent season of True Detective.
Oh my God, he is. I can hardly
Yeah.
remember him. There's a lot going on in
This
that
next
show.
actress also like just amazing character actress. I actually ran into her at the Trader Joe's in Atlanta one time.
Dude, did you say hi?
I did not because I don't do
Because you
that in
shouldn't.
general
Yeah,
with
right.
celebrities. Yeah.
Paula Malcolmson was Trixie. She's from Northern Ireland. She would end up in Ray Donovan
Hmm.
and The Hunger Games.
That's why she was in Atlanta because
Yeah.
they were shooting the Hunger Games. Yeah.
W. Earl Brown was Dan Doherty.
Also
Love
great.
Dan Doherty. Film, TV, and stage actor. He started in Chicago in theater. Wes Craven cast him in movies in the 90s. He was also on NYPD Blue in 2000. You know, those are probably the connections.
Yeah.
I saw him most recently in Hacks, and before that, I saw him get his head blown off in True Detective.
And he's in Justified. And I think the first season of
Oh
Justified.
yeah, yeah, he drops in as a not
Well,
great
kind of
guy.
everybody shows up in that
Yeah,
first season of Justified.
except Ian McShane. Finally, William Sanderson played E.B. Farnham, and William Sanderson was Sebastian in Blade Runner, and he was Larry in Newhart. He had a brother Daryl and another brother Daryl.
Yep. Yep. Every family member of mine, because we watched Newhart growing up, that's whenever he would show up on screen, that's exactly what they would say, the brother Daryl thing.
Yeah.
Um, writer's room, which, as we've established, seems to not actually be a room in which people write. It seems to be a room in which people type what David Milch tells them to do,
But they
which,
also structure episodes and turn in first
given
drafts
the
like
credits
the
that they
classic
have here,
showrunner
though,
thing. Yeah.
yeah, this feels a little, I don't know. Malcolm McCurry, he has several credits, but I didn't recognize any of them. He wrote two of the episodes, or he's credited with two of the episodes. Jody Worth, we mentioned earlier, she's credited with two episodes. Or no, Jody's a male name, I think. Producer on NYPD Blue and writer on Hill Street Blues. Okay, so there's the Milch connection. Elizabeth Sarnoff, also NYPD Blue. Crossing Jordan, Lost, Salem, Barry. I did not realize she's heavily involved with Barry.
Well, we should jump back real quick. Jody Worth and Elizabeth Sarnoff are the writers who were always in the room
Right.
where Milch is dictating.
Yeah. John Beluso was primarily a playwright and is known for focusing plays on the lives of disabled people. I think that from just reading briefly, I think maybe John Beluso wrote a lot of the stuff with Jewel, the character Jewel.
I mean, if he's being described as a playwright who focuses on disability, that is totally appropriate, right? That's the
Yeah.
Jewel has probably cerebral palsy of some kind. The
Well, they
character,
don't know at the point in time, but
yeah,
yeah,
they have no idea. Yeah,
there's no diagnosis. George Putnam and Brian McDonald, I don't have any credits for them. This next one, wow, again, another rock star. Also in the cast, Ricky Jay wrote episode 11. Ricky Jay, it's still weird to me that Ricky Jay's dead.
yeah, it sucks.
Ricky Jay was a stage magician, but he was primarily known as an actor, mainly worked with David Mamet. He's in just a ton of David Mamet movies, but he wrote as well, and he was a consultant on a lot of things, both that he appeared in and off screen. These are some movies that Ricky Jay was in that you might know him from. He was everywhere in the late 90s, early 2000s. The Prestige, Boogie Nights, Tomorrow Never Dies. I don't remember him in that. Magnolia. So he's in a lot of Paul Thomas Anderson stuff too. And there's an entire episode of PBS American Masters that is about him. He wrote these books that were essentially like
Yep.
historical archives of the history of stage magic or card
He
games or
has kind of
sleight
a
of
similar
hand.
profile to Teller, the magician.
Hmm. I'm very fond of Ricky Jay. He's in
Yeah.
some of my favorite David Mamet movies.
He was also able to throw a playing card such that it would stick into a watermelon.
Yes. Yeah, I remember that.
The last writer that we can talk about is Ted Mann, who we mentioned was not going to put up with Milch in the room. He worked on NYPD Blue, went on to work on John from Cincinnati, and he was on Millennium.
Yeah, I know that was like I was like, oh, there's a connection between some of my favorite television shows. Yeah, so Ted Mann clearly said this is not for me. I also can't imagine that Ricky Jay would also just hang out by a keyboard while David Milch told him what to put on it.
One would hope not.
Yeah.
All right. Let's talk about literal production. This
Mm,
is a lot of info. I'm going to start burning through it. You go ahead and stop me if you need me to.
okay.
The reason that Deadwood exists in a lot of ways is because David Milch wanted to write a cop show set in ancient Rome. The first arrest would be St. Paul, is a quote from him. And under the umbrella of a Paramount 4-year, $15 million deal, he pitched at HBO. And when he pitched at HBO, he said, I want to do a show set in ancient Rome. They said, well, we're actually already developing a show set in ancient Rome, but we would like a Western. And the joke is always that Milt said, yeah, same thing, because he was interested in lawlessness becoming civilization or
Hmm.
civilized society. Um, in September of 2000, Good Morning America reported that television writer producer David Milch, behind the police drama NYPD Blue for 7 years, is working with DreamWorks to develop a TV cop show set in ancient Rome. ABC, NBC, and Fox expressed serious interest in the project, as did Ridley Scott. DreamWorks Pictures co president Walter Parks was an executive producer on Gladiator and is credited with bringing the idea to Milch. The series will be produced jointly. This is what is being reported in 2000. The series will be produced jointly by DreamWorks and Paramount Network Television, where Milch signed a $15 million 4-year development deal just more than a year ago. And I should point out that 15 million in 2000 is like 30 million now.
I want you to unpack this a little bit more because we talked
Okay.
about it off air. So, my understanding from what you told me, because you researched this bit, is that the deal that Milch had with Paramount was that they gave him $15 million, but this was a development deal, meaning that he could not write anything for 4 years and he would still keep that $15 million.
I mean, that's how he described it. One wonders if the details of the contract would allow him to fuck off that way.
I'm sure the contract was very long. But the understanding is essentially anything he wrote during that time they owned.
This is like patronage. We're going to fund you for the next 4 years. What you work on, we will own.
But the reason why this is important and the reason why it's part of this whole lightning in the bottle thing, whereas like maybe John from Cincinnati wasn't, is that he had $15 million play money. So in theory, this is how he's able to put cowboys on Learjets and
Yeah.
hire a team of interns to follow him around and stay quiet,
And do all that research. Because
Right.
undoubtedly he's also making if not a living, he's making money off of royalties and other things attached to projects he's worked on. Um, but then also he was being funded so that he could work on what was important to him at that moment. The really big thing to take from this: network insiders told Variety that Paramount is asking TV networks for a 13 episode commitment with a huge license fee of 1.8 million per episode, meaning you pay us almost $2 million an episode to be able to broadcast it. We will sell it to the world. You get to have it in North America or whatever, but you give us 2 million and the rights to do some other stuff with it.
And that's not counting the production budget.
Now, I do not know enough to really dig in, but a license fee is almost always understood as something separate from the making
Yeah.
of something.
Yeah.
Okay. That would become Deadwood because HBO and Chris Albrecht, who was president of programming at the time, I'm sure that's not the actual title. Um, he said, no, we're working on a Rome thing, and that show would uh, happened maybe 2004, 2005. How about a Western? We want a Western. And Milch went for it. They ended up shooting the pilot episode in October of 2002. So in early 2000, they said he was working on a cop show set in Rome. In September, they reported that he is pitching it. 2 years later, they're making it for HBO up in the North California mountains. Molly Parker said, "We shot on this ranch where they shot High Noon and some Elvis Presley Western, Gene Autry's ranch. Um, Up past Santa Clarita, they built Deadwood up there."
Yeah.
She said by
I
the
know that's
time,
always weird to me because it feels like so authentically in South Dakota, but it's not.
no, they went up, they had, by the end of the third season, they had 4 or 5 blocks of Deadwood built in a ranch. Um, Also, here's a bit. Molly Parker said that Janie Bryant was the costume designer, and Janie Bryant would work on Mad Men later. It was her first big thing. She was so young, so talented. She made the most incredible costumes for me and for everyone. Plus, the guys were just filthy dirty all the time. The place smelled. We shot it in the summer and we had real animals there every day. There's a lot of talk about how, yeah, I mean, they couldn't actually be as dirty and filthy as Deadwood was, but it was a location. If it rained, it rained. If it got muddy, it got muddy, and the animals
Mm.
shit everywhere.
Hmm. The music was composed by a guy named David Schwartz. Um, it sounds like Schwartz, this is not just the music for the intro, the credits, but I think it's like the score as well. He's using all kinds of what like I guess we would think of as like uh Americana
Yeah,
instrumentation.
there's not a lot, if any, needle drops.
I don't even know what some of these instruments are. Cavaquinho, Weissenborn. I know what a harmonium is.
Yeah, there's this the thing from the music. There's this very particular like carefully loyal anachronism. Like
Mm.
uh, it was accepted in the Deadwood production. I'm just guessing at this, but it was accepted in the Deadwood production that, okay, we're coming to this with this understanding of the world that is modern, but we're going to do our best to reflect a world that is not.
Hmm. Yeah. And the ends of every episode kind of reflected that in that the closing credits, they always had like a song that was like a traditional kind of American folk or country song, but it was performed by a modern
Yeah.
musician. It wasn't like a archival recording.
Now, we've been talking about this fact that it's an HBO show. I have a little bit of information about the folks who produced the show for HBO. Uh, HBO started in the 70s as home box office, literally a service that would allow unedited uh, feature films be shown on television. But it became a network pretty shortly after that. And in the 2000s, it was trying to establish original programming. Uh, Off air, you and I talked a little bit about how crazy it is, but in the first 30 years of HBO's existence, they made like 10 shows. And then in the next 10 years after that, they made 30 shows or, something like that. Like
I think
really an explosion of programming.
the idea here is Deadwood was created at sort of this nexus point where they really ramped up production on original content.
And so when Milch pitched the Rome show, HBO chairman and CEO Chris Albrecht said, "Oh, let's do a Western. Let's make a contemporary Western and twist things around." Carolyn Strauss said, we mentioned her before. She was a vice president and original programming. She said, "Deadwood definitely will not be your grandpa's Western with white hats and black hats and always very clear distinction between the good guys and the bad guys. I think a Western is a comfort food for a lot of people. And yet to do a provocative Western in a very complicated time, such as one that we're living in now, seems like a really good idea."
Oh, Carolyn, if only you knew.
How complicated things would be.
Yeah.
And because it was made at HBO, Greg Feinberg became the co executive producer. Greg Feinberg is a producer who entered the film business out of college in the 80s. He was on Twin Peaks as a producer.
Mm,
And
interesting.
by late 90s, became a go to producer for HBO. Um, he's all over the place. Uh, Mind of the Married Man, which I have no memory of, and Carnival, which I have a little memory of, but also know it's not so great. But then also he produced Deadwood and True Blood. He directed some later episodes of Deadwood. He is really not present in the like myth building of Deadwood. I didn't find a Greg Feinberg interview. It's more like this is a guy who kept the trains running on time.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's what I was saying earlier when I was talking about how Milch is, as much as he's like this very original creator, he's also a part of this machine. Like,
For
we're
sure.
throwing around all of these names. I'm sure if you live in Hollywood, Greg Feinberg is a known quantity,
I
and
bet.
people are like, oh, wow, you're going to be on a Greg Feinberg project. But to us, these casual viewers from afar, it's like, who's this person, right?
Yeah.
But they're all part of the business.
And you'd best not cross Greg, I think.
Who knows? Who knows what Greg is like?
There's
I do see here, though, that Greg worked on Sequest DSV, which is, as far from Deadwood as you can get. So I think your point is made. Yeah.
Everybody's got to start somewhere. There are two more production entities I want to mention, and they're so small. Redboard Productions and Roscoe Productions are two other credits for
Hmm.
Deadwood season one. Redboard is just David Milch's what they call a vanity plate.
That's what I assumed. Yeah.
If you watch pretty much any show, if you watch the full credits, near the end, there'll be moments where these, sometimes animated, sometimes not, images pop up. And it'll be like sarcastic productions, or I'm trying not to think of all the ones I know, but or yo-yo pictures. And that's just someone making it themselves. So Redboard is David Milch, and Roscoe Productions was the company that was the Deadwood production team. They
Oh,
incorporate and then they
yeah.
disincorporate.
They made a little LLC for the
Yeah.
4 years or whatever. Yeah.
Roscoe Productions had the contract with the ranch where Deadwood was built.
Okay.
All right, dude. We have talked for fucking ever, man. Let's take a
Yeah.
break. And when we come back, we'll talk about the rest of the stuff. Hey, Chris,
Hello.
this is the Patreon spot.
I know. This is the spot where you guilt me into being as involved on Patreon as I probably should be.
No, this is the spot where I confess to you that I have made a stretch goal.
You did?
I
Is
did.
it already up there?
It's already up there.
Okay.
If we reach 250 patrons, paid or free, I am going to begin a solo bonus podcast for paid members.
Really?
Uh,
What is this podcast going to be about?
it's going to be called Listening to 1973. Each episode will be one LP, not a compilation, of probably pop, rock, or jazz, from 1973 that I listen to in its entirety, and do like a mini super context dive on, who made
Hmm.
it, who produced it, uh, where does it fall in their career, what do people think of it then, what do people think of it now, and then also talk about if it matters to me or not, because I realized that I'm from 1973. And so I'd like to listen to that music and do a little digging. I've already started a few listens,
Hmm.
and there's some crazy ass shit that I'm going to talk about.
So that's the significance, is it's the year you were born.
Yeah. And when I
Okay.
get tired of that, because there's no way to exhaust all the records, but when I get tired of that, I will then do listening to 1991,
And how old were you in 1991?
the perfect age.
Well, if you want to listen to Charlie talk about albums from 1973, you'll want to go to patreon.com/supercontext and give $1 to become one of those patrons. And we agreed it's 250 people. You're not
250.
going to
We're
move the needle.
we're almost halfway there.
Okay. Are you going to have guest hosts on this side podcast?
Well, you've told me you don't want to do anything extra, but you're always welcome, especially if I find something that I know you'll hate.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Give us a preview. What's one potential thing that you could throw out there to really hook people on?
There's a band called Dawn, which eventually became Tony Orlando and Dawn. And the record that has their version of Tie a Yellow Ribbon Around the Old Oak Tree was a huge hit in 1973. And that record is fucking nuts. Okay. Deadwood, season one, first episode came out March of 2004. And it was pretty well received, the whole
Hmm.
season. Let's do consumption. I'm going to really hit let's do consumption to see if those AI generated transcripts will pop up a section heading for us.
They did just start sending us like emails about tuberculosis.
Oh, nice. I like that. Okay. Uh, the reviews were good. It was certainly critically acclaimed. There was much less of a formal internet review culture than there is now, but people liked it in general. On Metacritic, it gets an 80 out of 100 from 26 critics. Rotten Tomatoes has an 85% rating based on 40 reviews. Ultimately, 8.2 out of 10 is the score. So people like this. And I think that most of the reviews that are bad that I have encountered, the gripes are legitimate in the sense that maybe someone says, I'm not interested in this kind of language. I'm not interested in this kind of violence. There's too much going on here. I don't like a Western, like,
Yeah.
I don't think very many people said, this is a poorly made show and I don't want to watch it.
Right. They were superficial issues with things that they didn't like subjectively, not, um, the work that was put into the show. It was more like, this isn't to my personal taste.
Yeah. In the Hollywood Reporter, Barry Guerin reviewed it well, said the production credits are outstanding. I'm not quite sure what that means because then he says, combining the scenic wonder of the Dakota hills with the rough and tumble environment of this crude settlement. I guess he's just talking about production, people doing production.
Yeah.
Also calls out Walter Hill's direction and says that Carradine and Ian McShane are excellent performers, excellent actors. Variety said HBO just might have found its next great dramatic addiction, a vulgar, gritty, at times downright nasty take on the Old West. It's funny to me to recognize that a lot of people, their first review of it was, oh, this is so rough. This is so hard. And yet I'm compelled. But it
So,
became my comfort. It became my comfortable, happy place by the time I'd
yeah,
seen the first season all the way through.
I had an impression of looking at the reviews. These were the only two that I thought were worth sharing with the audience, to be honest with you. But looking at the reviews that came out at the time, not these like 25-year
Yeah,
retrospectives or
of
whatever,
which there are many.
tons. Um, the reviews that came out at the time, I think people didn't know what to make of it. I think they had the words to describe what it was and what was on the screen, but I think it really took like the first season of sort of setting the stage before the machine of media journalism was able to be like, okay, here's how this compares to other things that we have an understanding of.
The very first shot I ever saw of Deadwood was on a friend's TV. Like, I knocked on the door, I was let in, and someone was watching TV in the living room that I walked into. And it was Ian McShane getting a blowjob, very obviously, but not graphically,
Yeah.
looking into the camera, essentially saying, even now, this gives me no pleasure.
Hmm.
And I was like, what the fuck was that? And then, they paused it and we talked. Uh, and so I didn't really, you know, imagining someone getting a little taste of Deadwood from any particular part of it to then be like, I, anyway, I don't know
I
how I ever ended up going back to it.
well, let me put it this way. Going into this episode, I did not realize how personal this was to you. I did not know this was a formative, this is Soundgarden for you. Like this
Oh
is
yeah, yeah, yeah.
you have like a real um whereas like I really love this show. And honestly, I can't remember which of us put it on the board because I thought I did. It sounds like you must have.
Who knows?
But yeah, I had no idea like this was formative for you.
So it came out when I was 31.
What does that mean?
Uh, that's a particular time, like I was out of my 20s
Hmm.
and I was in the midst of this really damaging but also very affecting doomed romantic relationship. Uh,
Yeah.
and I think the reason I'm saying all that is just to say Deadwood resonated with that.
Mm.
It wasn't like, oh my God, I love this album and I listened to it back when I was in high school. It was more like that, well, this is lightning in the bottle kind of stuff. It worked for me at the time very well. I don't know how well it would work for me if it just happened now.
I want us to come back to that at the end when we're talking about themes because I'm curious. Maybe you don't know, and we don't need to dig too deep into it, but what it is about doomed romance that made this stick so well. But
Ooh,
let's come back to it.
all right. It won a ton of awards. We've got, let's see, I'm going to do a quick count: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. All of that, almost 30 awards nominated or won. And some of the wins are big, like the AFI Awards. It won for Program of the Year in 2004. Outstanding achievements in sound mixing, outstanding directorial achievement, best performance by an actor in a television series. That was for Ian McShane. Outstanding directing for a drama series. Walter Hill got a lot of play from the pilot episode. Another outstanding sound editing win, individual achievement in drama for Ian McShane. And much later, it would win the Heritage Award from the TCA Awards in 2019. But
It must have
then,
been a later season because or I've made this memory up, but I distinctly remember watching a Golden Globes in which they won for best television series,
oh,
and
yeah, it kept winning
the whole
awards.
cast came up on stage. Yeah.
Yeah. And here's the other thing that's very cool: a Peabody Award, Stories That Matter. Deadwood won an award that is often for important and affecting journalism.
Interesting. Really?
Yeah, man.
It affected it in the way that people wrote about it, or affected it in that journalism was a theme within the show that was explored? Because both those things are true.
Well, let's see. Here is the listing for the award. Deadwood, as imagined and created by producer writer David Milch, exists somewhere between history and fiction, somewhere between civilization and savagery, somewhere between nightmare and dream. Peopled with historical figures such as Wild Bill Hickok, Calamity Jane, and others, this depiction of a frontier mining camp may come as close to physical accuracy as any cinematic version ever constructed. Okay, so for reinventing and reinvigorating a classic genre, a Peabody Award goes to Deadwood.
Oh, okay. Interesting. I didn't know that they did that. Are you ready to segue into representation? Because there's some juicy stuff in here. We
There
don't
is.
normally get that. I mean, even before I found these research bits, as I was going over the credits, I was like, oh, this is like everybody who worked on this is white and male, except for like one
I'd like you
person.
to try and really work the algorithm to get that subject heading, though, that section heading. So let's
Oh, for
say it
sure.
with me.
Yeah.
Representation is what we're going to talk about now. Representation, Chris.
So you've got we just listed all the directors, we listed all the writers. I think of all of those people, one of them was a woman, right?
Going by
Um,
names alone. Yeah.
yeah. And the cast obviously is more diverse, but this is not a show where like there's an episode from Woo's perspective, right? Um, at the same time,
People don't know who that is.
Wu is a Chinese character on this show who doesn't speak English, and I would say for most viewers of the show is a gag because the only English word he knows is cocksucker. In some ways, he is almost as offensive as Hop Sing on Bonanza. Like, except that there are scenes that go into the depth of like what Chinese life was historically like in camps like this.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I'm planting this because I found a tidbit in Milch's biography that I wasn't aware of, which is that he's run into controversy for statements he's made about writing characters that are of identities that are not his. Um, Primarily, this was when he was on NYPD Blue, where he would, he'd be making comments in the press, and people would kind of be like, "Whoa, hold on! Like, you don't get to say that about how you write a black man on a TV show." And I don't remember the name of the guy, but there was a guy who challenged him on it and wrote an essay about it and was kind of like, "This is not cool." And to his credit, David Milch read that and hired that guy and was like, "Okay, like I want you in the room now. I want this perspective." So I don't want to make it out to be like, "Oh, Milch is just like another boomer who only has like a white male perspective." But at the same time, like I think he does have flaws, but when they're pointed out to him, he's willing to admit to them.
Yeah,
Um,
there's not. So in the 90s, he said a lot of the writing by black writers that I read early in my career was not very good. He said to write a racist character, I have to admit that I'm racist. He messed around in what I think of as that 90s sort of. Oh, we talked about it with the Steve Albini episode just recently. In the 90s, there's a little bit of I'm obviously not really racist, so I can
oh,
talk about this stuff in a kind of charged way, and everyone has to grant me the room to talk
and you
about.
know what we said about Steve Albini about that?
Well, he apologized for doing that.
Well, not just that, but that he was able to do it because he had the privilege to do it.
Yeah, as did
And
David
same is
Milch.
for Milch. Yeah.
In fact,
So I'm torn.
well, he had the privilege to be able to say, "Oh yeah, you got me," and to
Yeah.
keep working.
Yeah. At the same time, there's lots of stuff here in the research where Milch was very intentional about how he wrote about women, wrote women characters, but also about the history of women in this period, Native Americans and their role. And I can't even remember. Are there any on-screen depictions of Native Americans in this, or are they only mentioned off-screen in
No,
Deadwood?
there's a couple, I think, non-speaking parts, and Bullock has a run-in with a Native American up in the
Oh,
mountains.
right, right. I forgot about that. Yeah.
And what's funny is that it feels like a weird sort of like overdone kind of scenario.
Hmm.
And then a character named Charlie Utter explains some of the stuff that happened to Bullock. He's like, "Oh,
Hmm.
yeah, that was him counting coup or whatever it is." But then I,
But also with the Chinese immigrants, like with Wu, like I think there's a reading that you can have on this where you're like, oh, like Wu is just the butt of a joke in this show. And then there's another reading that's like, no one has shown until now what Chinese life was like in these times.
well, in particular about the fight between Bullock and the Native American, when I was doing some research on a Stephen Graham Jones book, I read essentially a description of what Charlie Utter describes and what Bullock experiences. I was like, oh, this is pulled from the texts. There is an argument to be made that it is less than ideal that a white male genius, problematic writer is the one who is driving the depiction of historical fact of underrepresented groups. But also, it was clear that he did the research in order to write the things that he wanted to write.
Yeah, so this is where I was going is like, what is the difference? And I'm saying this rhetorically, between a white guy doing all the research into the history and then taking that and putting it into his creation, or hiring a Native American writer to work on the show with him. I think that's, the difference between diversity and representation.
Yeah.
So, okay, he's including these characters in his show, but is there representation actually in the room? I don't. I don't know. I didn't do a genealogy on all the people in the writer's room, but
Yeah. Well, so when he explains, the way that women are written in Deadwood, he says the plain fact is that women were very much second class citizens in this place at this time. There were very few women there. Men outnumbered women. Most women were working as prostitutes. But the idea of a woman's equality takes root here, begins to thrive, and you will see that in the process of a woman like Alma Garrett. You begin to see women occupying other ecological niches other than that which someone like Swearingen has assigned them, because Swearingen runs a whorehouse. Um, so that's good that he's got the historical perspective and that he's trying to write with that
yeah.
understanding, but also he's still he's still a man writing his vision of a woman's experience, even if it's well
Hmm.
researched.
Hmm.
um, I don't think that somehow Deadwood is bad because a white guy wrote all of these parts,
Right. No, neither do I. But I think it's
but I think it would
worth
have been
talking
better.
about.
Yeah, well, no, I think it probably would have been better if the writers' room had people who were being remediated, people whose identity was being remediated by Milch
Hmm.
to challenge him. I mean, and like he showed sort of publicly, who knows what the actual story is, but publicly he hired a person who got up in his face about it. I think that was David Mills, right? And David Mills, who also would end up on The Wire. Is that right? Yeah, David Mills, who wrote On the Corner and The Wire. So there's a lot of like public acknowledgement. I think of this as like recovery stuff. Like, oh, yeah, yeah, you're right. I need to acknowledge that. And maybe
Making amends.
yeah, and maybe the behavior doesn't change completely, but it changes some. Um, I I love Deadwood. I don't love David Milch. I want to make that clear. I am not like, oh, David Milch is a creator that I have to protect and support. I
Yeah.
love what he did, but he's also done enough stuff that I don't think is very good that I don't idolize the man.
Hmm. Um, Regarding Native Americans in history within the show, there's I put this in the notes. We're not reading through all this. He gives like a 3 paragraph speech in an interview, essentially, where he again, like he knows he spent 2 years doing the research. He rattles off the history of Native Americans in that region at the interviewer. But then it's after he does all that that he talks about like, okay, this is why it's important to the creation of the show. He says, the taking of the land from Native Americans, that original sin is not the end of the story, it's the beginning of the story. To me, the presence of whites is the result of a bloody and oppressive transaction. But now what? I feel an impatience for those who would simply freeze at that moment and keep scratching the scab out of sinfulness. So, in the horror of the time, I tried not to fail to also appreciate the moments of glory. When one character finds it in himself or herself, for whatever reason or accident of confusion, to reach a hand out to another. That's how the humanity, in fits and starts, and with terrible losses along the way, makes what passes for progress. And as we'll talk about, like that's the theme of this show.
Yeah, and there's this kind of remarkable thing. It's a sentiment that I really love, but also within it is a kind of reminder that for a little while there, people got a lot of credit for saying what folks in other cultures understood, trying to speak for a group, saying, "Well, I've talked to a lot of people and I've learned a lot." But anyway,
Yeah.
this is also a neat thing to say. So it's like Milch. It's I really like it, but also like, oh, okay, not great.
There are some ways in which like he's a very didactic person, right? And I wonder like if Deadwood were coming out nowadays and there were these interviews if people would talk about like the possibility of some kind of neurodiversity with David Milch, you know?
Oh, very nice.
Um,
He said, when a culture intuits that it's about to be overwhelmed, there's a tendency to postulate an alternate reality as transcending the seeming futility of the present. So when the Indians, he said Indians, came to understand, at least intuitively, that their culture was about to be overrun, there came Wovoka and the ghost dance, in which they were impervious to the bullets which seemed to kill them, and therefore were able to walk right into the gunfire. Or consider the parallels with the Islamists who, as they experienced the influx of the West and modernity, postulated this reality where if I kill myself, I immediately go to the true reality.
So keep in mind, he's saying this 3 years after 9/11.
Yeah,
Um,
right.
at the same time, this also reads like my dad telling me that he knows what the solution is to peace in the
Exactly.
Middle East, you
That's
know?
exactly what I'm talking about. Like this is interesting and it's a cool thought, but also he gets to a place where he's saying, and this is what this monolithic other
Yeah.
thought at a time.
And
But
he
then
says it in a way where he's like, I have the answer. I've
yeah,
figured it out. This is the answer. I know it.
I know
But
the
then
history.
it takes all these paragraphs of him monologuing until we get to like I think what is core to the show. And also reading this also helped me to sort of feel like I understand our present as well. He said, "We are capable, and it's the terror of our species, human species, of the most suicidal mythologies, one of which, as Conrad understood better than anyone among our storytellers, is the idea of our superiority, that it is just as suicidal to deny the humanity of the Indian, ultimately just as suicidal as to walk into bullets." So he's sort of talking about this idea that just humans in general they tell stories to themselves about why it's okay for them to kind of make violent, grand decisions um, that maybe aren't necessarily logical to what is quote unquote civilization.
Yeah. I mean, there's multiple characters in Deadwood who have a rational and ultimately beneficial aim, but pursue it with irrational and malignant strategies. That is to say, uh, Al Swearingen would like Deadwood and South Dakota to become part of the United States so that there is some
Yeah,
structure. He would like to do that so that he can keep all of the money that he's made from murdering, stealing, and prostitution.
yeah, yeah.
He also, while he is the mastermind of the town, he's also going a little crazy. Like
Hmm.
there's he talks to a head that was brought for a bounty.
Well, that's exactly. I think that is a good moment of like pure genius in this show is that like it is not just in that like we're showing that the history of modern America came from a dirty place, but also that there were toxic impacts upon these people who were privileged and were in power. And I think there's a little bit of Milch in Swearingen, right?
Oh, there
Like,
has to be, right?
yeah. Um, So I want to skip over. There's a whole section here where it's essentially Milch again, just talking at the interviewer about everything he's learned about the history of Chinese immigrants in the Badlands.
Which can be summed up in the way that people were treated really poorly. And I
Yeah.
wanted to represent the people who were being treated poorly. It's important for you to know that I wasn't doing it just to show someone getting treated poorly. It was happening at the time. And
Yeah.
there's a little bit of that throughout of Milch being like, hey, I wrote it this way because that's how it was.
There is a piece though that is not Milch, just holding court, which is by Michael K. Johnson. It's an academic article called Queer Spaces and Emotional Couplings in Deadwood. By the way, a zillion academic pieces written about this TV show.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
I mean,
Deadwood is a spout of academic interpretation.
we're going long already, and like we haven't even scratched the surface of what people have written about this show. But Michael Johnson writes, this is from the abstract. In an analysis of the series' homophobic language, Johnson points out that Deadwood persistently calls viewers' attention to sexual practices that are generally invisible until the show's third season. What they mean is we don't see visually in the show any queer interactions between characters, even though there are queer characters on the show.
Although in hindsight, you can see kind of like flirtation and also connection.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, there's a whole bunch of citing of different theories that this person is using. But then it says he focuses primarily on the way Deadwood uses and represents space and the ways in which it is designated public and private is undermined by characters' movements back and forth between them, noting in particular the homelessness and constant movements of Joni and Jane. So these are two female characters who end up having a gay relationship. I think at the end of the season, right? Not the season, sorry, the whole series, right?
Yeah, by the end of the series, we see that Jane and Joni um, have romantic and physical attachment.
Yeah. And then they say emotional couplings are defined here. They may or may not involve physical sexuality, but they may involve same-sex couplings as the same as opposite-sex ones. But they all originate in private spaces. Ultimately, the effect is on the public world of Deadwood, which is central to the series' main theme that the evolution of society is within a frontier town. So, whether or not Milch was thinking, oh, I'm going to make sure that there's these private and public queer spaces that are
Right.
manufactured, like, probably not. But there is some pretty deep analysis into how there is representation.
Yeah. This white male creator, when his show delved into the experiences of women, the experiences of Chinese immigrants, the experiences of Black people, not so much in the first season, the experiences of queer people, outsiders. It did not sand off the edges. The show
Yeah.
did not try to push them into kind of a, oh, this is how they're different than white men. It's clear that Milch was comfortable making white men the engines of the plot because, hey, that's how it was in the West. And he was doing his best to, through research, understand and represent other people.
Let's be honest, like he's also a product of the time and space that he's
Yeah,
within, the context, right?
yeah.
Like
He totally
he
tried. That's what you
yeah.
can say.
Yeah, I think he did. I don't know if I want to say he did his best, but like, these were the circumstances within which he was raised as a creator in the system that he was within. So he's working within that. I think for the time, Deadwood is really like displaying representation on screen in a way most other things weren't,
Yeah,
And HBO is probably where we saw a lot of that groundwork laid, but we weren't at that point yet. I don't know, when did this start? 2013, the early 20 teens is probably when we really started to think about identity, um, in like a very big picture kind of way
oh
about our
yeah. did
storytelling.
did something happen in pop culture or American culture that made that happen?
What do you think it is?
Well, I think it's a black president. I think that's what happened in.
Oh, interesting. You think I'd never heard that, but that makes sense. You think that that was like the inciting point that made it so that culture critics really felt like, okay, we can put a stamp on this now?
I
Because
think that whatever the like calm surface of everything, like
yeah,
the lake that was how people were willing to talk about race, I think it had a huge rock thrown in it when Obama was elected, and that
I
made
yeah,
everybody come to the center.
I
Like
think you're not wrong, but I also think social media had a big part to play as
I'm
well.
sure it did, but
Yeah,
I think that without Obama being elected, I think social media would have had less of an effect that way, or it would have taken longer.
sure,
I
sure.
think the
Yeah,
inflection was that election.
yeah.
And I didn't mean to rhyme. I apologize.
It was pretty cool.
No, it
Good
wasn't.
segue into talking about regulation, in which we actually have notes this time.
We do, except unfortunately, the notes we have, they're just about history. Nothing really happened. So
It is
here's,
about history in as much as every interview that we have with David Milch at the time, he gives every interviewer a lesson in history.
yeah, because of the way that so much of what's in Deadwood is essentially, X-rated in the classic sense. It is
Mhm.
out of line with community standards, all that kind of stuff.
Well, so there's this interview, which we've already cited from, between Milch and Nathaniel Lewis, who I think we established this at the top of the episode 6 hours ago. But Nathaniel Lewis is the son of one of Milch's mentors at
Yeah,
Yale. And Nathaniel Lewis is the one who brings it up. He says there's a number of people who argue that Deadwood is a radical departure from not only the Hays Code, but from Westerns as a genre themselves. And so
Now,
let's
yeah,
talk about the Hays Code
let's
for a
get a
second.
little history.
Yeah.
When Hollywood started to regulate itself, say in the 30s, um, it it made sure that it was matching certain standards that were conservative and sanitized. And Western Western stories seem to be particularly sanitized because of the idea of the rugged, violent cowboy, and
Hmm.
what was going on out there. The thing that I always think of is you couldn't have the gun and the person being shot in the same frame.
Oh yeah. Yeah, this was in the Comics Code as well. Yeah. They actually the Comics Code was based on the Hays Code. Yeah, I mean there was a lot of really silly stuff that was regulated in these, but they defined our stories for 50 years
Yeah.
longer. Um,
And Milch wants to say that, in a way, the fact that it's a Western that's crossing these lines, his show being a Western crossing these lines, is kind of going back and maybe trying to fix a little bit of what the Hays Code did to our understanding of the West.
mhm.
He says, I think that the strictures of the Hays Code were such that to me, the revisionism was those strictures imposed upon wonderful work. uh, you know, I'm not a revisionist. It was the people doing Hays Code's Westerns that were revisionists. The ingenuity of Ford, the director, and the other masters was in being able to sustain a kind of realism in spite of that, in spite of the Hays Code, through the creation of laconic or stoic characters who therefore were not forced to depart from the realities of the situation by speaking too much. I love that the quiet cowboy, Milch is saying, was partly so that they didn't have to make it so the cowboy didn't curse. He could just not speak.
I don't know. Yeah, that seems like a stretch to me. Um, I also, you know, there's a lot here that's implying that, oh, Deadwood is the first to do this. But you probably know better than I do. I feel like there were plenty of Westerns in the 80s and the 90s that were really starting to push back on these ideas.
I mean,
Isn't Unforgiven like,
sure. And
uh,
and the Wild Bunch, but that's violence. The fact that it was the language, the fact that it was like the word cocksucker is pretty brutal to a lot of people.
hmm. Okay, I hadn't thought about that before. I guess because I have a potty mouth in general.
Yes.
I don't know necessarily that like the impact was there for me as much as it might have been for others.
Well, I mean, you know, I'm not an expert, but the fact that it is, I mean, in Deadwood, it's used in the language of passive or submission. In um, America, gay rights and
Yeah.
understanding of queer spaces, it gets lumped into certain acts, sexual acts, instead of a whole
Hmm.
understanding of someone's existence. You know,
Yeah. Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I guess what I'm coming around to is I think that we are giving Milch credit where it's maybe not due. Like,
I'm not giving Milch any credit on this.
I'm not saying you, I'm
Yeah,
saying
okay.
the people in the pieces, the homework.
I think the credit we can give him is that he went for it, and in doing so, made a lot of people talk about language in a way that they had not been.
Okay. Okay.
And by those, a lot of people, I don't mean scholars. I mean, folks were saying, did you hear what that guy said on Deadwood?
Yeah. One more piece of regulation, and then let's try to bring this home with the themes. So there's an article on Looper that is like, I forget the exact title, but it's like top 10 reasons why Deadwood was canceled and will never come back or something like that. And it gets in, I know we said we're not going to talk about the cancellation, but it gets into this whole production deal. Um, so this is regulation. It's just commercial regulation. It's not
Yeah.
government regulation, but HBO was owned by Warner Media at the time. Ironically, it is now, as we're recording this, just bought by Paramount. But HBO and Paramount were two entirely separate companies, but Paramount owned the show Deadwood because they were the ones who gave David Milch $15 million to do whatever he wanted with.
They owned part of Deadwood.
Okay.
They owned the rights to do some stuff with Deadwood. That's the thing.
But because there were these two opposing companies involved, it made there have to be a lot more meetings. There were a lot more business suits sitting around tables talking about contracts and trying to iron out who got what money from Deadwood. And that was a big part of why it was difficult to produce and to keep making, and why I think those two companies eventually were like, no, this is not worth it.
Yeah. I mean, you can sum it up by saying HBO had to pay Paramount for the privilege of making the show. And then Paramount was able to make money off the show by using the international rights. It was,
Yeah.
interestingly enough, a little bit like academic writing, where you pay for what you gave away for free.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's my political statement for
Yeah,
the
nice.
episode.
You could put that on your LinkedIn.
Fuck you. Fuck you twice. All right. I've had a lot of fun talking about the show. It's like fun to get into it in certain ways. There's so much trivia that would be entertaining to get into, talking about stories of actors, meaning actors' stories about things that happen and all that. But that's not really what we do for Super Context. And I encourage anyone listening who's like, man, the hell's going on with the show? You can go and find interviews by many of the main players of the show and hear a ton of shit. One of my favorites, of course, is the story that has in the middle, yeah, we're going to kill the kid.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
that's a good
Yeah,
one.
I've heard that story. Oliphant tells that story on every talk show he goes on. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think you and I talked at the beginning of the episode about connections to the show. Now, you have a tragic real life connection to Deadwood that then kind of got dragged into this. For me, I have a connection because I turned this into, if not into background noise, I made it into a thing that I learned the ins and outs of, despite it being difficult and profane and violent. I made it into my rewatch show, which I understand from a lot of people. Rewatch shows are more like The Office these days, where you're like,
Really?
well, it's something that is not too transgressive and also is comfortable to rewatch. But I
Yeah,
had,
you and I have very different definitions of that.
oh, tell me more.
No, I don't mean you and I from each other. I mean you and I from these
Oh,
other people you're
yeah.
referencing. I can't imagine watching all of The Office, much less watching it twice.
So let's do, we don't normally do this. I'd like to very quickly give like a Cliff's notes, a what's coming. So we've got in our identity and themes section what the opening credits seem to imply. Someone does a deep dive into the symbolism. Got borders and boundaries. Got civilization being organized out of chaos around symbols. Theme, character, and language. What community is made of. And then finally, all cops are bastards.
Yeah, that's my subjective. I'm glad you previewed that. So we'll get to it in a minute. Um that was my realization during one of Milf's David
Milfs,
Milf.
dude, fucking no.
David Milch's one of his soliloquies in the middle of an interview. I was like, "Oh, he's saying that all cops are bastards. He's 20 years ahead of his
Yeah.
time."
All right. Let's talk about the opening credits because they not only do they set the tone for the show, but they also seem to set the tone for all of the themes that we identified.
I
And there's
think so,
plenty
yeah.
more.
Yeah,
Everybody can delve into the show through their particular lens. Um, but the things that stuck out for me and you from what people had found as what stuck out for them was this kind of taming, civilizing, and adapting sort of movement in in the show itself, but also in the particular characters' journeys. And it starts from the opening credits.
Yeah, so this is a piece from Cinematics by Caleb Boyer, and it's a real like close read
Oh yes,
of the opening segment. Um, I'm not going to read all of this, but essentially, Caleb says, we get this imagery of a wild stallion going through the wilderness, and it eventually runs through the developing town of Deadwood. And that's rich with symbolism because it's showing off this sort of, nature versus civilization theme of the show. Then he talks about all of these different symbols. Again, I'm not sure how intentional these are, especially because I don't know about this one in particular, but most opening sequences are not made by the same production company that makes a show. It's usually sent off to like an agency, and they're
even if
like,
it's accidental, though,
yeah,
it works. The close reading works.
it does. Yeah. I mean,
As,
hey, if
yeah,
this was a paper in my class, I'd give it an A.
yeah. As long as you don't say, "Oh, this is what they meant," but if you say, "This is what seems to happen,"
Yeah.
a horse runs down out of the wild into town. Once it hits town, you start seeing details of what makes a town. Um, pick axes, gold being sifted, whiskey being poured, the building of homes and storefronts. The horse runs through. Then comes the defining moment. The stallion, having charged through the wilderness, arrives in Deadwood's muddy thoroughfares. Its reflection shimmers in a puddle, a distorted, fleeting image of its identity. The wild stallion, still physically present, is now merely a reflection, a shadow of itself. This symbolic transition lies at the heart of Deadwood's thematic concerns. The series does not romanticize civilization, but presents its arrival as often ugly, violent, and morally ambiguous. And I would go so far as to say that my relationship that I talked about presented itself as civilized, but was often ugly, violent, and morally ambiguous.
Oh, there it is. Like, so you already answered that question that I had for you earlier that I saved for this segment. Maybe that's it.
I've been waiting. Yeah. I mean, I I was in a relationship in which we both drank too much. Uh, one of us was very unfaithful, and I was a little bit unfaithful, and we brought out, I think, bad impulses in each other,
Hmm.
and and yet we were a couple. We lived together. We managed a life together for a short period of time. It was a incomplete version of a domestic partnership.
Okay.
It had not become a full town yet. It was still a camp.
I think at the end of this piece that this writer, it's a good segue into thinking about the bigger themes of the show. And I think that's what you're grabbing on here, where you're able to see resonance of that within your own relationship, right? And ultimately, like Milch will say later, this is a show about, it's easy to say, oh, this is a show about civilization, but like what's required, what sacrifices are required to
Yeah.
make something civilized.
Yeah. What do you
Um,
lose even when you're building?
mhm.
And that also fits neatly into this the next bit, border and boundaries, which is a very deep dive into a particular aspect of what we're talking about. But I want to kind of pull it back up to the top. Uh, Steve Peacock writes that Deadwood is concerned with the fundamental theme of settlement, exploring the creation and closure of the frontier as a line between urbanized civilized society and untamed wilderness and wildness. The show is full of people crossing lines in the figurative sense, crossing lines in the literal sense, what's allowed in a place, what's allowed outside of a place, what you can do with someone, to someone, as a certain class of person, where in town you can be. And having a portrait of those lines and that kind of behavior where crossing the line can end in your own death
Mm. Hmm.
suddenly, I think it makes it dramatic and engaging in a way that just being sad about having said something stupid at a party does not.
Mm. I'm not sure. Okay, I'm having trouble connecting the
Gotcha.
dots
Okay.
there.
A lot of the lines, the borders that are,
Yeah.
sort of described in Deadwood are about what is okay to say to someone, what is okay to
Oh.
do in public, which
Oh,
is also something
interesting.
that we're
Yeah.
always talking about. I feel so bad. I can't believe I said that, or oh, that was out of line. But
Hmm.
the stuff that happens now in my life, I think in yours too, that's maybe out of line, is someone says something that hurts your feelings, and then you're like, I don't know if I want to hang out with them anymore. In Deadwood, if you cross the line, you might be one of the seven murders that day.
So this piece actually made me think of this sort of like long-sighted piece of academic theory by Benedict Anderson, the imagined communities theory. This idea that there are no real borders between nations. All of the trappings of flags and culture and all of that is something that we collectively make up together.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
and I think what you're talking about is that each civilization places limits upon itself on what it finds acceptable to exist together in community. And I think that's also what's happening here in this Stephen Peacock piece. What this makes me think of is Deadwood is so specifically about how America came to be, how America, the America that we live in now, got here, why America is different than other nations and cultures around the world. And so that makes me wonder if this had been a show about Roman police officers, how different it would have been. Because it would have had the same themes about civilization arising from chaos, but they would have been very different in how they did that because they had different limits than we do. And so again, like I'm riffing here,
Yeah. Go
but
for it.
pulling this from your whole idea of this toxic relationship you had, what you see in Deadwood is at the beginning everyone is fulfilling their urges without a care about anybody else around them, whether that's getting drunk or having sex with a woman who is then cast aside because she's worth less than this is a Milch thing that he said, like something like prostitutes were worth less dead to just bring in a different prostitute than she would be to feed and keep alive.
Yeah, that's one of the really, brutal things that he describes, is that they just used up women that they were disposable.
Yeah. And so like the things that, most international at least folks that I know think of when they think of America, like sex, drugs, and violence are all like sort of concentrated here. And I think too, like the show is about, okay, like how do we tame those urges? How do we sacrifice those, what we think of as sort of romantic, I'm just going to do what I want, rugged individualism in order to create a society where seven people don't die every day.
Yeah, I mean, there's Deadwood starts in a place of anybody who I want dead, I'm just going to kill.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and ends with we're going to have elections. You
So
know,
let me throw this at you then. Okay. I didn't think of this until just now.
okay.
Is this what people are talking about when they say make America great again?
Uh, no, you know that they're talking about what things were like when they were young in the 50s.
But
But
they weren't.
what they have to deal, oh, no, they weren't. They weren't. But when you're young, things are simpler. Things are a lot easier. I mean, my God, when I think about my life before I had a mortgage, oh, so much easiar.
I
Um,
guess I'm asking you this question because of, and I'm not going to get into it, but of I've had recent brushes with up close and
yes,
personal
you have.
with MAGA, and my take on it is that it is very, at least from these personal interactions that I had for 9 months, is that it's well, I just want to do what I want to do, without anybody telling me what I want to do.
Oh yeah, my mom has a backyard neighbor who her explanation of why she was doing what she was doing with the public space was, I do what I want.
Right. Which is the reverse of this, right? Is it that in the origin of Deadwood, everybody did whatever they wanted.
Yeah.
And that resulted in 7 dead people a day. And it took these characters coming together and agreeing on a set of not maybe not even rules, but like guidelines.
Yeah. But if, to be real simple about it, and I know I'm being simple about it, but America is a free country. We're not beholden to a king or a religion. You can be who you want to be. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, God given rights. And what this show kind of presents is that you have to give up a little bit of that freedom to act collectively, to have a
Yeah.
society and we don't. I think a lot of people get really bristly whenever you say something like you got to give up some freedoms to have a society, because that sounds like communism, or that sounds like an attempt to control behavior or whatever. And I get that, because I also know that there are certain freedoms that if someone were to say you can't have this freedom anymore because that's how society will work, I would reject that.
Mm,
But it's the set of things that you're going to reject that kind of make up your political um, your profile, political identity. And this is, well, we have the quote from Damien Love, who we talked about his article earlier. Grappling with history in a story envisaged to unfold over 5 years, it portrays the violent birth of the modern USA. Like all the greatest Westerns, it's America talking about itself to itself. The show is Milch's way of saying that, though a lawless existence at the edge of the frontier has its attractions, collective survival requires human beings to learn to function interdependently. And in that way, communities become single organisms. There has to be ways to exist together. And I mean, it's very libertarian. Your right to swing your arm ends at the tip of my nose kind of stuff. But Milch gets deeper into it. As Damien Love says, it's no coincidence that Milch has spent much of his life exploring varieties of decadence and rapture, temptations of self destruction, and not quite unpardonable sinning. That life has now led him to Deadwood, very much a collective enterprise and a peculiarly compelling vehicle for exploring the artistic possibilities of redemption and the redemptive possibilities of art. Milch, as an addict, undoubtedly has hurt people who haven't forgiven him and hurt people who have forgiven him. And Damien Love is making the connection that Milch is understanding that your personal behavior needs to be reined in a way to be able to function, saying also that societal behavior needs to be reined in order to function.
mm.
There's that big speech in the season where Reverend Smith does a eulogy for Wild Bill Hickok. I have a chunk of it here because an article in one of those academic books called "Who Put the Gun in the Whore's Hand," which I think is a kind of reference to one of the lines in the show. This is by Witschi and Graulich. They take apart that speech by Smith. They say Smith, a former battlefield nurse at the war's bloodiest battles of Shiloh and Manassas, begins the service for Wild Bill with a figurative and literal allusion to the Civil War. Mr. Hickok will lie beside two brothers. One he likely killed, the other he killed for certain, and he's been killed now in turn. So much blood. And on the battlefields of the brothers' war, I saw more blood than this, and asked then after the purpose, and did not know. But know now to testify that, not knowing, I believe. The body is not one member, but many. Even those members of the body which we think of as less honorable, all are necessary. He, talking about God, he says that there should be no schism in the body, but that the members should have the same care one to another. And whether one member suffer, all the members suffer with it. And like, I mean, that affects me deeply. I I also feel a kinship to Seth Bullock saying after he hears that, he says to Saul, "What the hell was he talking about? What part is my part? Is my hand my hand? Is my eye my hand? What are you even talking about?" I'm not getting it exactly right, of course, but you know, there is resistance throughout the show to people understanding that they're connected and that they have to be connected.
Hmm.
Um, People try to escape that connection throughout it, but it's also that's like sure that's America talking to itself, but it's also people in an apartment complex talking to each other. You can't just play music really loud in your apartment whenever you want. You've got people living on all sides of you.
This is what I'm saying is that like I think, you know, Deadwood came out 20 plus years ago now, 22 years ago as we're recording this. And I think that these were interrogating questions that we were beginning to feel within our society, that we're sort of questioning like what's the use of these limits that are placed upon us that are not actual laws necessarily, but are just understandings that we have amongst each other of what it
Norms,
means to
is
be
that right?
norms,
Yeah.
yeah, to be civilized amongst one another. And I think there's sort of two things that I would say in response to everything that you just went through. One is that I don't agree. I don't think you do either, but I don't agree necessarily with this notion of like, oh, America is this place of freedom and it's pure freedom and it's like nothing else in the world. Like, I think that's horseshit. I think it's always been horseshit. And I think a lot of this show is about why it is, right? And that, like, many of the people within this show who think of themselves as free individuals ultimately end up within the power of somebody else. Even
Mm.
Al Swearingen ends up within somebody else's power. Why? For money. That's what America's really about. But I think the other thing here is, yeah, that I think that the tension at the core of the show is the tension that's at the core of our society right now. Whether it's like, you know, playing out on the national stage or it's playing out when you're in traffic and somebody cuts you off.
Yeah. Okay. This this is a good spot to jump to the last bit
Yeah.
because you mentioned already, hey, what would this be like if it were actually in Rome? And
Yeah.
Milch said, I was interested in how people improvised the structures of a society when there was no law to guide them. That's like one of the very first lines of the pilot episode of Deadwood. No law at all in Deadwood. How the law developed out of the social impulse to minimize the collateral damage of the taking of revenge. That's what Milch says.
Hmm.
And I mean, that's a Christian thing, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
kind of floating, like, but it's also an everything thing, like, hey, let it go, don't keep this up. Like, why don't you just drop it and we can all live together? Um, but he starts with the thing about in Rome, there's no society or there is no law to guide how society is built. And he wanted to see what happened there. In Deadwood, what he ends up with is the edge of society, the edge of civilization. People who've gone to where there is no law purposefully,
Mm-hmm.
discovering that they would like law to come along and get them back into society. Like, that's a big thing that the mastermind of Deadwood, Al Swearingen, is talking about. We want to get annexed.
Well,
We want
not
to be,
only that, but like I don't even know that this is ever examined within the context of the show, right? The real reason they go there is because there's gold.
yeah,
But you know, and yes, while they're panning for gold, they can also exist in a society with no laws and just have a total bacchanalian
the
time while
first
they're
folks
there.
go for the gold. But remember,
Yeah,
Bullock and Starr go to Deadwood in order to sell stuff to the people who are trying to get the gold.
right. My point, which is like, why does gold have value?
It's a lie agreed upon.
Exactly. And Milch himself said in the show, but he says it in the interview right here too, right? Eventually, upon getting that gold, they have to bring it back to a place that's civilized enough to agree upon the lie that it
Right.
has value. You can't just exist in the total chaos of no laws.
And here's the magical thing about that too. Milch in the show shows two main characters, one of whom rejects being a lawman, and one of whom rejects abiding by the law. And both of them eventually end up doing exactly what they rejected because
Yeah.
Bullock. Well, here's why we brought up all cops are bastards. Seth Bullock, in his way, is every bit as savage as Swearingen. He has the same kind of savagery as those without the law, but his savagery accidentally binds to an idea of law. He allies himself to the law not because he believes in the law, but because it's what he uses to try and control himself, because he's afraid of the violence in his own nature. Swearingen binds himself to the idea of law because that's what will allow him to keep what he has taken.
Yeah.
And in a way, to let everybody keep what they have taken. And so the end of the first season is Bullock finally walking into Swearingen's office and saying, "I'll be your fucking sheriff." And Swearingen says, "Huzzah." Um, Both of them doing something that's sort of against their nature, because Swearingen starts the show as the devil. You
Yeah.
know, hey, we're going to fleece this guy and make sure you kill him later. And Bullock starts the show saying, "I'm not going to do this law thing. I'm not going to channel my anger into controlling people. I'm going to sell mining equipment."
Hmm.
But then they
Yeah, but
both,
interestingly, they're both coming at it from the same angle of making money. It's only when Bullock, and I think this is what makes, I wouldn't say makes Bullock the good guy, because Bullock is so three-dimensional as a character. He's not a white hat in any way, but he makes a choice that controlling himself is more important than the profit that he will make off the hardware store.
and he's going to use this thing in existence to channel. And this is then, I mean, I've said the phrase multiple times now because partly because it is transgressive in its own way. All cops are bastards, but it I forget where it comes from. But the idea is that to be the kind of person who will enforce the law, you cannot be a good person at your core or something like that.
Yeah, yeah. I
Or
forget who
even
it is who coined it.
enforcing the law makes you a harder person.
And that you believe you are inherently in a position to do so over other people, that there's something about you that makes you capable of the judgment and capable of enacting it on your fellow human beings.
So I think the thing that we've figured out about Deadwood is that the reason that it was so compelling is because Milch knew 20 years ahead of time what was going to be really important right now.
You've been listening to Super Context, a podcast autopsy of media.
How it's made and how it informs our everyday culture.
Our theme music is Human Factor by Mile Marker.
And you're listening to Drive Fast by 3 Chain Links.
All show notes are available at patreon.com/supercontext.
And you can email the show at supercontextpodcast@gmail.com.
I'm available on Blue Sky as @ChristianSager.
And I am not available. I have a scorched earth policy on social media. 2 N's, 2 T's.